So hey guys, this is your favorite fictional vortex. So in this video, we will see what if Naruto was the human host of a celestial phoenix god, Naruto x Gwen Tennyson x Lucy Mann, Ben 10. But before we start, remember to subscribe and like this video. Now let's start. Chapter 1. The Phoenix's Awakening. The wind, a mournful whisper across the scarred earth, carried the scent of petrichor and ancient sorrows. This was the Valley of the End, a place where legends had clashed and destinies had been irrevocably altered. But the colossal statues of Hashirama and Madara, once proud sentinels, were now little more than crumbling monoliths, their features eroded by time and the ceaseless tears of the waterfall that cascaded between them. It was a place of endings, a graveyard of ambitions, and for Naruto Uzumaki, it was a sanctuary. He stood upon the water's surface, his feet planted as firmly as if on solid ground, a testament to chakra control that had become as natural to him as breathing. The sun, a fiery orb descending towards the horizon, painted the sky in hues of orange and purple, casting his silhouette in stark relief against the dramatic backdrop. He was taller now, the lanky frame of his youth filled out with lean, hard-earned muscle. His once unruly blonde hair was still a sun-kissed mop, but it was longer, a few errant strands framing a face that had shed its boyish softness for the chiseled features of a man who had seen too much. But it was his eyes that held the most profound transformation. The cerulean blue was still there, but within their depths, a golden light swirled, a constant, gentle fire that spoke of power beyond the comprehension of most mortals. He closed his eyes, and the world dissolved into a symphony of sensations. He could feel the thrum of the earth beneath his feet, the life force of the ancient trees that clung stubbornly to the valley's cliffs, the weary sigh of the river as it continued its eternal journey. And deeper still, he could feel the celestial fire that coiled within his soul, a sentient, blazing entity that was both a part of him and something infinitely more. "You were distracted, my child." The voice was not of this world, a chorus of ethereal chimes that resonated not in his ears, but in the very core of his being. It was the voice of the celestial phoenix, the god-like being that had chosen him as its host on the night of his birth, the night the Kyuubi had been sealed within him. The great beast had been a cage, but the phoenix was a key to. He had unlocked a potential he was still struggling to fully grasp. "I am merely remembering," Naruto murmured, his voice a low, pleasant tenor that held a hint of a smile. "Remembrance is a luxury of the past. The present demands your focus." "And the future?" he asked, a genuine question. "The future is a river we navigate, not a destination we can chart." He opened his eyes, the golden light within them flaring for a moment. He had come a long way from the lonely, ostracized boy who had once craved the acknowledgement of his village. The villagers of Konaha still saw him as the Kyuubi Jinchuriki, a weapon to be feared and controlled. They were blind to the truth, to the celestial being that had tempered the fox's malevolent chakra, transforming it into a source of immense, purified power. He had long since stopped seeking their approval. His path was his own, guided by a wisdom that transcended the petty squabbles of shinobi nations. A flicker of movement in his peripheral vision, a distortion in the fabric of the world that only he could perceive, brought him back to the present. He turned his head, his gaze sweeping across the cliff tops. He saw nothing, heard nothing, but his senses, honed by years of training under the phoenix's tutelage, told him he was no longer alone. He remained motionless, a picture of tranquility, but beneath the calm exterior, his mind was a whirlwind of activity. He analyzed the terrain, calculated trajectories, and considered a dozen different scenarios. The phoenix had taught him more than just how to wield its power. It had taught him to see the world as a grand, intricate tapestry. To understand the delicate threads that bound everything together. Finally, they emerged from the shadows, their forms materializing from the gloom of the twilight. There were 5 of them, all clad in the nondescript black cloaks of missing nin, their faces obscured by porcelain masks that bore the snarling visages of demons. They moved with a silent, coordinated grace that spoke of years of shared experience, their chakra signatures, though suppressed, still hinting at a formidable level of skill. The leader, a man with a mask depicting a fanged oni, stepped forward, his voice a low, gravelly rasp. "Naruto Uzumaki, the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi. We have been searching for you." Naruto's lips quirked into a small, almost imperceptible smile. And now you have found me. What is it you want? Quote, "We are here to relieve you of your burden," the Oni masked man said, his voice laced with a fanatical zeal. "The tailed beasts are a curse upon this world, a perversion of nature. We will extract the Kyuubi and usher in an era of true peace." Naruto's smile faded, replaced by a look of profound disappointment. "You speak of peace, yet you wear the masks of demons and walk the path of violence. You are a walking contradiction." The Oni masked man bristled at the accusation. "You are a child who knows nothing of true suffering. The Biju are weapons of mass destruction, and those who wield them are no better than the monsters they contain. And you believe that by gathering these weapons, you will bring about peace." Naruto's voice was calm, but there was an undercurrent of steel that made the air crackle with a palpable tension. "You are not the first to harbor such a misguided ambition. And you will not be the last. Your words are meaningless," the Oni masked man sneered. "Prepare yourself, Jinchuriki. Your time in this world is at an end." The 5 missing nin exploded into action, their movements a blur of speed and deadly intent. Woe of them sped towards him across the water, their feet leaving shimmering trails of chakra in their wake. The other 3 formed a triangle on the cliff tops, their hands flashing through a series of intricate seals. Naruto remained motionless, his eyes tracking the movements of his attackers with an unnerving calm. He could see the flaws in their formation, the subtle tells in their body language, the infinitesimal gaps in their coordination. They were skilled, yes, but their skills were born of desperation and hatred. His were born of a celestial harmony. The 2 on the water reached him first, their blades coated in a sickly green poison, flashing in the fading light. He didn't move, not until the very last moment. Then, with a grace that seemed to defy the laws of physics, he swayed to the side. The 2 blades missing him by a hair's breadth. He moved like a leaf on the wind, his body flowing around their attacks with an effortless ease. As they passed him, he reached out, his hands moving with a languid, almost lazy speed. He tapped the back of one of the missing nin's necks with 2 fingers, a surge of golden energy flowing from his fingertips. The man's eyes widened in surprise, and then he crumpled, his body spasming as the celestial energy overloaded his chakra network. The second attacker, seeing his comrade fall, let out a roar of rage and spun around, his blade sweeping in a vicious arc. Naruto simply raised a hand, his palm open, and caught the blade between his thumb and forefinger. The razor-sharp steel, capable of slicing through solid rock, stopped dead, unable to move an inch. The missing nin stared in disbelief, his mind unable to comprehend what he was seeing. Naruto's grip was not one of brute strength, it was something more, something fundamental. It was as if he had commanded the very concept of motion to cease. With a flick of his wrist, Naruto shattered the blade, the shards of metal falling into the water with a soft splash. He then delivered a gentle palm strike to the man's chest. It was not a blow meant to kill, but to disable. The man was sent flying, skipping across the water like a stone before crashing into the base of the Hashirama statue, where he lay, groaning in pain. All of this had taken less than a second. On the cliff tops, the remaining 3 missing nin completed their jutsu. A massive, swirling vortex of wind, fire, and lightning. A deadly combination jutsu formed above them, crackling with a terrifying power. "Behold the wrath of the heavens!" The Oni masked man roared, his voice filled with a triumphant glee. "This is a power that can level mountains. You cannot hope to survive." Naruto looked up at the swirling vortex of destruction, his expression one of bored indifference. He raised a single hand, his palm facing the oncoming storm. A golden aura, warm and gentle, enveloped him, the light so pure that it seemed to banish the shadows of the valley. "You speak of the heavens," Naruto said, his voice now a resonant chorus that seemed to echo from the very firmament, "but you know nothing of their true power." The vortex descended, a maelstrom of elemental fury that threatened to tear the very fabric of reality apart. The water of the valley churned, the ancient trees groaned, and the crumbling statues seemed to shrink in the face of such overwhelming power. And then it hit him. Or rather, he hit the golden aura that surrounded him. There was no earth-shattering explosion, no cataclysmic clash of energies. The vortex simply dissolved. The wind died down, the fire was extinguished, and lightning dissipated into harmless sparks. The golden aura around Naruto had not repelled the attack, it had absorbed it, assimilated it, and rendered it inert. The three missing nin on the cliff top stared in stunned silence. Their minds reeling from the impossible sight. Their ultimate attack, a jutsu that had taken them years to perfect, had been nullified with a casual wave of a hand. Impossible, the Oni masked man whispered, his voice trembling. Naruto lowered his hand, the golden aura receding back into his body. He looked at the three remaining attackers, his eyes filled not with anger, but with a profound sadness. Your path ends here, he said, his voice soft, yet carrying the weight of an undeniable truth. He vanished. He didn't use a shunshin, no flicker of movement, no puff of smoke. He simply ceased to be in one place and appeared in another. He was now standing in the middle of the three missing nin on the clifftop, his back to the Oni masked man. The other two, their faces pale with terror, tried to react, but they were too slow. Naruto's hands moved in a blur, his fingers striking a series of pressure points on their bodies with a surgeon's precision. They froze, their bodies locked in place, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and awe. The Oni masked man, his fanaticism finally giving way to a primal fear, spun around, a kunai appearing in his hand as if by magic. He lunged, his blade aimed at Naruto's heart. Naruto didn't even turn to face him. He simply raised a hand behind him, and a small, intricate seal, glowing with a soft golden light, appeared on the back of his hand. The kunai, just inches from its target, stopped, held in place by an invisible force. The Oni masked man struggled, his muscles straining, but he could not move the kunai forward an inch. It was as if he were trying to push against a mountain. You have a choice, Naruto said, his voice calm and even. You can walk away from this path of self-destruction, or you can continue to embrace the darkness until it consumes you. The choice is yours. He lowered his hand, and the invisible force that held the kunai vanished. The Oni masked man, caught off balance, stumbled forward, his kunai clattering to the ground. He looked at Naruto, his eyes, visible through the sockets of his mask, wide with a dawning comprehension. He was not just facing a Jinchuriki, he was facing something more. Something ancient and powerful, something that defied all logic and reason. With a strangled cry, he turned and fled, his two paralyzed comrades left behind. He scrambled down the cliff face, his movements clumsy and panicked, and disappeared into the deepening shadows of the forest. Naruto did not pursue him. He knew that the seeds of doubt had been planted. Whether they would blossom into redemption or wither into despair was a choice the man had to make for himself. He turned to the two paralyzed missing nin, his expression unreadable. He reached out and gently touched their foreheads, a soft golden light flowing from his fingertips. He was not healing them, he was showing them. He was giving them a glimpse of the universe as he saw it, a universe of interconnectedness, of life and death, of creation and destruction, all part of a grand, cosmic dance. When he removed his hands, the two men slumped to the ground, their bodies still paralyzed, but their eyes were no longer filled with fear. They were filled with a profound, soul-shattering awe. They had seen the truth, and it had broken them. He left them there, knowing that Konaha patrols would find them eventually. His message had been delivered. As he turned to leave, a flicker of movement in the trees on the opposite cliff caught his attention. He focused his senses, and a faint, almost imperceptible chakra signature registered in his mind. It was timid, hesitant, like a frightened rabbit. He smiled. He had known she was there all along. He took a step, and the world seemed to bend around him. In the blink of an eye, he was standing on the other cliff, just a few feet away from a young girl who was hiding behind a large oak tree. She was small for her age, with long, dark blue hair that shimmered in the moonlight and pale, almost translucent skin, but it was her eyes that were her most striking feature. They were a pale, pearlescent lavender, the pupils almost indistinguishable from the irises. They were the eyes of a Hyuga. Hinata Hyuga, the heiress to the prestigious Hyuga clan, looked at him with a mixture of awe and terror. She had been following him, her curiosity getting the better of her. And she had witnessed the entire battle. She had seen him move with a grace that surpassed even the most skilled practitioners of the gentle fist. She had seen him nullify a jutsu that could have wiped a small village off the map. She had seen him face 5 deadly assassins with a calm that bordered on divine. She had always admired him from afar, drawn to his indomitable spirit, his refusa. To be broken by the scorn of the villagers. But this was something else entirely. This was not the boisterous, knuckle-headed ninja she had once known. This was a man who radiated a power so immense, so profound, that it made her knees weak and her heart pound in her chest. "You are a long way from home, Hinata, Naruto said, his voice gentle, so as not to startle her. Hinata squeaked and tried to hide further behind the tree, her face a fiery red. Naruto-kun, I was just on a walk," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. Naruto's smile widened. He had always had a soft spot for the shy, gentle Hyuga heiress. He could see the kindness in her heart, the strength that lay hidden beneath her timid exterior. "A rather dangerous place for a walk," he said, his golden eyes twinkling with amusement. "The Valley of the End has a habit of attracting, interesting company." Hinata peeked out from behind the tree, her lavender eyes wide with a mixture of fear and fascination. You were incredible. Naruto-kun. I've never seen anything like it. I am simply, me," he said, the answer both simple and profoundly complex. "And you, Hinata, should not be out here alone. Allow me to escort you back to the village." Before she could protest, he was beside her, his presence a warm, comforting aura that seemed to chase away the chill of the night. He offered her his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His hand was warm and strong, and a jolt of electricity, a sensation that had nothing to do with chakra, shot up her arm. They walked in silence for a while, the only sounds the chirping of crickets and the rustle of leaves in the gentle breeze. Hinata found herself stealing glances at him, at the strong line of his jaw, the gentle curve of his lips, the golden fire that danced in his eyes. She felt a strange sense of peace in his presence, a feeling of safety that she had never known before. As they reached the outskirts of the village, the massive gates of Konaha looming in the distance, Naruto stopped. He turned to her, his expression serious. "Hinata," he said, his voice a low, intimate murmur, "the world is changing. There are forces at play that even the cage do not understand. Be careful." Hinata looked at him, her heart filled with a sudden, overwhelming concern. "And you, Naruto-kun, will you be careful?" He smiled, a sad, knowing smile. "I am the eye of the storm, Hinata. I do not have the luxury of being careful." He then leaned forward and gently kissed her on the forehead. It was a chaste, innocent gesture, but for Hinata, it was as if a bolt of lightning had struck her. Her mind went blank, her heart stopped beating, and her entire world was reduced to the feeling of his lips on her skin. When he pulled away, his golden eyes were soft and filled with an emotion she could not quite decipher. "Go now," he said, his voice a gentle command. "And do not follow me again. My path is not one for the faint of heart." He turned and walked away, his form slowly dissolving into the shadows of the forest. Hinata stood there for a long time, her hand on her forehead, her heart a wild, chaotic drum in her chest. She had always known that Naruto Uzumaki was special. But tonight, she had seen the truth. He was not just a Jinchuriki, not just a ninja. He was something more, something magnificent, something celestial. And in that moment, she knew, with a certainty that shook her to the very core of her being, that she would do anything, face any danger, to be a part of his world. The shy, timid SS of the Hyuga clan had found her purpose. And it was a purpose that would lead her down a path far more dangerous and far more wonderful than she could ever have imagined. Chapter 1 End. Chapter 2. The Rift Between Worlds. The transition from the blood-soaked history of the Valley of the End to the tranquil heart of Edelgird was always a jarring, yet profoundly centering, experience for Naruto. One was a monument to conflict. The other, a testament to harmony. He stepped through a shimmering, invisible threshold, a fuinjutsu matrix of his own design, woven into the very fabric of space-time, and the air changed. The scent of ancient sorrow was replaced by the fragrance of moonpetal blossoms and clean, ionized air. The mournful sigh of the wind gave way to the gentle hum of unseen energies in the distant melodic chime of crystal spires resonating with the pocket dimension's ambient life force. Edelgird was his creation, his sanctuary, his answer to a world that had tried to break him. It was a city built not of dead stone and cold steel, but of living wood, cultivated crystal, and the intricate, glowing lacework of fuinjutsu. Towers of pearlescent wood, grown and shaped by potent life-infused chakra, spiraled towards a sky that was a permanent, breathtaking tapestry of nebulae and constellations, a celestial ceiling of his own choosing. Crystalline bridges, humming with a soft inner light, arched over canals of purified water that flowed with a gentle, hypnotic current. Floating islands, lush with flora from every corner of the elemental nations and some corners that existed only in his memory of the phoenix's knowledge, drifted lazily through the air, their roots dangling like ethereal veils. This was not merely a village, it was an ecosystem, a self-sustaining marvel of engineering and ninjutsu that blended the organic with the arcane. There was no smoke, no pollution. Energy was drawn directly from the dimension's core, a stable singularity he had anchored within a seal so complex it would have driven most masters of the art to madness. The citizens of Edelgird, a collection of outcasts, refugees, and those who had simply grown weary of the endless cycle of hatred and war, moved with a sense of purpose and peace that was all but extinct in the outside world. Children of the Yuki clan, their ice release no longer a curse, played alongside former shinobi from Iwa and Kumo. Their past allegiances shed like old skin. Naruto walked along a pathway of polished obsidian that seemed to drink the starlight from the sky above. He wore not the garish orange of his youth, but simple, elegant robes of deep indigo and black, embroidered with subtle, golden phoenix feathers. His presence was a calming balm to those he passed. They greeted him not with the reverence of a leader or the fear of a weapon, but with the genuine warmth reserved for a beloved founder and protector. He was there, Tenshi-sama, their celestial lord, a title bestowed out of respect, not commanded by rank. He was making his way towards the core spire, the central pillar of Edelgird where he conducted his research and maintained the dimensional stabilizers, when he felt it. It was not a sound, nor a tremor. It was a discordance, a single, jarring, dissonant chord in the grand symphony of the cosmos that only he, with his senses attuned to the celestial plane, could perceive. It was the sound of reality tearing. He stopped, his head tilting slightly, his golden eyes narrowing as he focused on the source of the disturbance. It was faint, but growing, a high-frequency vibration that scraped against the clean, ordered energies of his dimension like a nail on a chalkboard. A breach, the phoenix's voice echoed in his mind, its tone a rare mixture of curiosity and caution. Unnatural, violent, not of this reality's weave. Location, Naruto asked aloud, his voice low and steady. He didn't need a verbal answer. A flood of spatial coordinates and energy readings filled his mind. The breach was small, unstable, and located in the undeveloped sector of the dimension, the verdant expanse, a vast, untouched wilderness he maintained for its raw, natural beauty. Without a word to the passers-by, he dissolved. Not in a flicker of speed or a puff of smoke, but like a mirage fading in the heat. He flowed through the dimensional pathways, his consciousness the vessel, his destination the target. He rematerialized in an instant, standing on a carpet of phosphorescent moss under the canopy of giant, silver-barked trees. The air here was thick with the scent of damp earth and alien flora. And the dissonant hum was now a palpable, visible phenomenon. Before him, the air shimmered and warped, colors bleeding into one another in a way that defied the laws of physics. The space bent inward, twisting into a vortex of screaming light and shadow, about 10 feet in diameter. It was a raw, chaotic wound in the skin of his world. Debris, not rock or metal, but strange, unidentifiable fragments of some other place, were spat out from its maw, dissolving into nothingness as they contacted the different universal laws of his dimension. He watched, his face a mask of calm analysis. This was no naturally occurring wormhole. This was a forced entry, a violent puncture. As he observed, the vortex pulsed violently, and two figures were ejected from it, tumbling through the air, with panicked cries before landing in a heap on the soft moss. A moment later, the vortex collapsed in on itself with a sickening implosion, leaving behind only the lingering scent of ozone and the faint, shimmering afterimage of its presence. Silence returned to the verdant expanse, broken only by the groans of the two newcomers. Naruto remained where he was, a silent sentinel in the shadows of the giant trees, his celestial senses analyzing the two figures. They were young, female, and their energy signatures were utterly alien. One crackled with a structured, vibrant power that felt like a cousin to the energies of nature, but was far more ordered, more mathematical. The other possessed a bizarre, fluid energy, a biological signature that seemed to be in a constant state of flux, shifting and changing at a whim. They were not from this world. That much was certain. The first to stir was a girl with vibrant, shoulder-length red hair, clad in a strange blue shirt, a black skirt, and white shoes. She pushed herself up, groaning as she clutched her head. Okay. Dimensional portal travel. 1 star. Do not recommend. She blinked, her green eyes wide as she took in the impossible landscape. Whoa, Ben, you moron. What did you do now? This doesn't look like Mr. Smoothie. The second figure, a girl with a more punk rock aesthetic. Short, spiky purple hair, dark clothing, and a mish. Ivous glint in her amethyst eyes, unfolded herself from the ground with a lithe grace. Forget the smoothies, Gwen. Check out the flora. It's like a botanical garden on acid. She stretched, her joints popping. I think I landed on my spleen. Is that bad? You're a Lenopen, Lucy. Your spleen is probably in your elbow this week, Gwen retorted, her voice sharp with worry as she pulled a small, pink, cat-faced device from her pocket. She tapped its screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. Mana levels are weird. Off the charts, but not in a way I recognize. And the dimensional frequency is completely uncatalogued. We are seriously lost. Lucy Mann, the Lenopen, shrugged, seemingly unbothered. She sniffed the air, her nose wrinkling. Smells nice, though, earthy, with a hint of starlight and, as that cinnamon. She then froze, her body tensing as her alien senses finally picked up on the third presence in the clearing. Gwen, she said, her playful tone gone, replaced by a low hiss. We're not alone. Gwen immediately snapped into a defensive posture, her hands glowing with a soft pink energy. Who's there? Show yourself. Naruto decided the observation period was over. He took a single, silent step forward, emerging from the deep shadows of the silver-barked trees into the soft, ambient light of the clearing. He did not emerge like a predator, but like the moon from behind a cloud, a natural, inevitable presence. The two girls stared, their defensive stances faltering for a beat in sheer surprise. He was not what they had expected. He was tall and lean, robed in dark, elegant fabrics that seemed to absorb the strange light of the forest. His blonde hair was like a splash of sun in the gloom, but it was his eyes that captured their attention. Cerulean blue, yet swirling with an inner, golden fire that seemed ancient, wise, and impossibly powerful. He radiated an aura of absolute calm, a palpable tranquility that was at odds with the raw power they could now feel rolling off him in gentle, controlled waves. Greetings, Naruto said, his voice a calm, resonant baritone that seemed to perfectly match the serene yet powerful atmosphere of the forest. It is not often I receive visitors who arrive by tearing a hole in the fabric of my world. Welcome to Edelgird. Lucy was the first to find her voice, her bravado a clear defense mechanism. Edel, what now? And who are you supposed to be? The welcoming committee. Nice robes, by the way. Very mystical Zen master. Gwen elbowed her, her eyes still locked on Naruto, analyzing him with an intensity that belied her age. My apologies for the abrupt arrival. It wasn't intentional. There was an accident with a dimensional projector. One moment we were in Bellwood, the next, here. She gestured with a glowing hand. You said, your world. Are you saying this is a private dimension? It is, Naruto confirmed with a slight nod. A sanctuary, shielded from the chaos of my home reality. You are safe here. The pink energy emanating from Gwen's hands didn't faze him in the slightest. He had seen far more intimidating displays. Gwen's eyes widened. A stable, artificial pocket dimension of this size. The energy requirements alone would be astronomical. The being that could create and maintain such a place would have to be on a scale she had only encountered in creatures like the Dagon or Vilgax. Yet, this man, he seemed so young. So human. But the power she felt from him was anything but. It was a deep, steady ocean of energy, vast and ancient. Safe, Lucy scoffed, crossing her arms. Her form flickered for a second, her skin taking on a slightly gooey, purple texture before she forced it back to her human guise. Says the guy who snuck up on us in the creepy, glow-in-the-dark forest. For all we know, you're getting ready to dissect us. Naruto's lips quirked into a small, amused smile. The girl's defensiveness was like a shield of brittle glass, easily seen through. If I had wished you harm, you would have been incapacitated before you were even aware of my presence. I have no interest in dissection. His gaze was direct, unwavering, and utterly devoid of malice. It was disarmingly sincere. My name is Naruto Uzumaki. And you have my word, you are guests here, not prisoners. Gwen, the more logical of the two, decided to take a chance. She lowered her hands, the pink glow fading. I'm Gwen Tennyson. My friends call me Gwen. This is Lucy Mann. She looked at him, her scientific and magical curiosity overriding her fear. Your energy signature, it's unlike anything I've ever encountered. It's not mana. It feels alive, sentient. A keen observation, Naruto acknowledged. What you are sensing is the fusion of my own life force, or chakra, with a celestial entity. It is unique to me. He offered a simple explanation, a truth that was so profound it sounded like an understatement. Gwen's mind raced. Chakra, celestial entity. This was a whole new paradigm of esoteric science. She was itching to pull out a spellbook, to run a full diagnostic, but she restrained herself. They were guests, and their host was a being of clearly immense power. Politeness and caution were paramount. Lucy, on the other hand, was less interested in the scientific minutiae. She was more focused on the man himself. His quiet confidence was magnetic. He hadn't even blinked when her form had shifted. A reaction so different from the usual surprise or disgust she sometimes encountered. He just looked at her as if a girl turning into a purple puddle was the most normal thing in the world. And that, more than anything, intrigued her. So, Goldilocks, Lucy said, her tone shifting from hostile to playfully curious. You got a dimension, an army of glowing trees, what else? You hiding in this little snow globe of yours? Naruto's smile widened slightly. He appreciated her directness. It was refreshing. A city, a community, and, perhaps, a way for you to get your bearing. GS and figure out how to return to this Bellwood you speak of. He gestured back the way he had come. If you would follow me, I can offer you proper hospitality. The moss is comfortable, but I assure you, my guest quarters are more so. Gwen and Lucy exchanged a look. They had no other options. They were stranded in another reality, with no idea how to get back. Their only point of contact was the enigmatic, golden-eyed man who claimed this entire dimension as his own. Gwen gave a slight nod. Trust was a gamble, but a necessary one. Lucy shrugged, a smirk playing on her lips. At the very least, it promised to be interesting. Lead the way, Zen Master, Lucy said, her swagger returning. But if this is a trick and you try to eat my brain, I'll turn into a giant slime monster and redecorate your entire dimension. Naruto chuckled, a low, pleasant sound that seemed to put the very forest at ease. I will keep that in mind. Now, come, there is much to discuss, and the celestial mechanic of a forced dimensional rupture are a topic I find endlessly fascinating. He turned and began to walk, his movements fluid and silent. Gwen and Lucy hurried to follow, emerging from the dense forest into a clearing that overlooked a breathtaking vista. They both stopped dead, their mouths falling open in unison. Before them, nestled in a valley under the swirling, star-dusted sky, was Edelgird. It was a city straight out of a fantasy novel, a fusion of organic beauty and impossible technology that stole their breath. The glowing towers, the crystalline bridges, the floating gardens, it was more beautiful and more advanced than any city they had ever seen, including the high-tech plumber facilities on other worlds. Okay, Gwen breathed, her voice filled with awe. This is impossible. The architecture, the energy distribution, it's perfect. Lucy whistled, a long, low sound of appreciation. Forget the snow globe. He owns paradise. Her eyes found Naruto, who had stopped and was watching them with a patient, knowing look. Her initial assessment of him as just a powerful guy was rapidly expanding. This wasn't just power. This was creativity, vision, genius. The total dreamboat assessment, however, remained firmly in place, and was, if anything, gaining significant evidence to support its claim. Welcome, Naruto said again, his voice carrying a note of pride as he gestured to the city below. To the heart of my world. As he led them down a winding path that seemed to materialize before them with each step, Gwen peppered him with questions. She asked about the energy source, the principles of fuinjutsu, the biological makeup of the living wood. Naruto answered her patiently, his explanations clear and concise, though he could tell that the fundamental principles of chakra were a concept she was struggling to fit into her understanding of mana and universal laws. He was impressed by her intellect, by the sheer speed at which her mind worked. Lucy, for her part, walked beside him. Content to simply observe, she watched the way he moved, the way the very air seemed to respect his presence. She noted the small details, the intricate seal patterns that glowed faintly on the backs of his hands. The way the golden light in his eyes seemed to intensify when he was explaining a particularly complex concept to Gwen. He was powerful, intelligent, and, as she had already noted, incredibly handsome. He was, in a word, interesting. And Lucy Mann was a huge fan of interesting. They entered the city, and the wonders only increased. They saw people from different clans and backgrounds mingling freely, their children playing together in parks filled with impossible, glowing flowers. They traveled not by walking, but by stepping onto silent, floating discs of light that zipped along invisible pathways through the air, offering them a panoramic view of the city's splendor. Naruto led them to a spire on the city's edge, one that overlooked a vast, tranquil lake whose waters mirrored the nebulae above with perfect clarity. The interior was just as breathtaking as the exterior, a seamless blend of comfort and elegance. The walls were smooth, polished wood. The furniture was crafted from solid, translucent crystal that glowed with a soft inner light, and a large window offered an uninterrupted view of the city and the lake. These will be your quarters for as long as you need them, Naruto announced. They are supplied with everything you might require. The nutrient synthesizers can replicate most basic foodstuffs, though I would recommend you try the local cuisine at some point. It is unique. Gwen was running a hand along a wall, her expression one of utter fascination. The entire structure is a single, living organism, isn't it? The energy flows through it like a nervous system. This is beyond anything I've ever seen. It is a product of necessity and imagination, Naruto said simply. Rest. Recover. We can discuss the complexities of your situation once you are settled. I will have a meal sent up. He turned to leave, but Lucy stepped in his way, a playful smirk on her face. Not so fast, landlord. You've shown us your crib, told us your name. What's the catch? What do you get out of this? Naruto met her gaze, his golden eyes unreadable. I get the satisfaction of helping two people who are lost and in need of aid. I get the opportunity to learn about a world beyond my own. And, he added, a hint of a true, warm smile gracing his lips, I get a brief respite from the crushing solitude that comes with being the sole guardian of a place like this. Is that sufficient payment? His honesty was another unexpected blow. There was no subterfuge, no hidden agenda she could detect. Just a simple, profound loneliness that he wore as comfortably as his robes. It humanized him, made the impossible being standing before her feel suddenly, surprisingly, relatable. Lucy's smirk softened into a genuine smile. Yeah, she said, her voice softer than before. Yeah, that'll do. He gave them both a final nod and then exited, the door whispering shut behind him. Gwen and Lucy were left alone in the opulent room, the silence thick with unspoken thoughts. Gwen finally broke it, collapsing onto a crystalline sofa that surprisingly molded to her form. Okay, so, we've been shot across dimensions, crash-landed in a magical super city built inside a pocket universe. And our host is a demigod with celestial fire in his eyes who speaks like a philosophy professor. She took a deep breath. This is officially the weirdest Tuesday we've ever had. Lucy walked over to the massive window, pressing her hands against the cool, smooth surface as she stared out at the impossible city. Weird. Gwen, this is awesome, she said, a grin spreading across her face. And our host, I don't know about the demigod part, but I'm definitely getting a celestial vibe. Her eyes sparkled with a mischievous light. This is going to be so much more fun than summer school. Gwen could only shake her head, but she couldn't suppress the small smile that tugged at her own lips. As terrifying and confusing as their situation was, she couldn't deny the thrill of discovery. The sheer, mind-bending wonder of it all. And at the center of it was Naruto Uzumaki, a mystery wrapped in an enigma, radiating a power that felt as gentle as a sunrise and as absolute as a supernova. Their journey in this new world had just begun, and it was already shaping up to be the greatest adventure of their lives. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. Whispers in the Shadows. A week in Edelgird was like a lifetime spent in a waking dream. For Gwen Tennyson, it was an academic paradise. The core spire housed a library that dwarfed anything on Earth, filled not with books, but with crystalline data shards that projected knowledge directly into the user's mind. Under Naruto's patient guidance, she had begun to unravel the esoteric principles of chakra. It was a maddeningly beautiful system, a confluence of spiritual, physical, and mental energies that was both elegantly simple and infinitely complex. It defied the rigid, structured laws of her mana-based magic, yet she could see the parallels. The points where the two systems of power seemed to be singing the same song in different languages. She spent hours in deep conversation with Naruto, their discussions a whirlwind of magical theory, dimensional mechanics, and quantum physics. In him, she found a mind that was not only her equal but her superior in ways she was still struggling to comprehend. He could grasp the most abstract concepts of her magic with an intuitive leap of logic, often rephrasing her own theories back to her with a clarity that left her breathless. This intellectual intimacy, this meeting of minds, was a far more potent and dizzying experience than any mere physical attraction. For Mann, Edelgird was the ultimate playground. She spent her days exploring the city's wonders, her shapeshifting abilities allowing her to experience it from 1,000 different perspectives. One day she was a bird, soaring amongst the crystal spires. The next, she was a river sprite, swimming in the purified canals. The city's inhabitants, a tapestry of 12 different cultures and clans, were a source of endless fascination. They accepted her open nature without a second glance. Their own histories filled with enough strangeness that a girl who could turn into goo was hardly worth a raised eyebrow. She found a particular joy in playfully tormenting the stoic former shinobi who acted as the city's sentinels, her pranks a welcome source of levity in their otherwise disciplined lives. But beneath the playful exterior, she was watching Naruto. She saw the way he governed, not with edicts and laws, but with quiet wisdom and earned respect. She saw the genuine affection the children had for him, the trust the elders placed in him. He was the unshakable pillar upon which this entire perfect world rested. The sheer weight of that responsibility, a weight he carried with such effortless grace, was something she found herself admiring more and more each day. The dreamboat had depth. They were gathered in one of the spire's upper observatories, a circular room with a floor of polished obsidian that mirrored the star-dusted heavens above. A soft, ambient light pulsed from the walls, and the air was still and silent. Naruto stood before a large, holographic projection of his home world, the elemental nations rendered in shimmering, topographical detail. "I must leave Edelgird for a time," he announced, his voice breaking the comfortable silence. His tone was matter-of-fact, but Gwen and Lucy had learned to detect the subtle undercurrents. There was a gravity to his words that instantly put them on alert. "Trouble in paradise?" Lucy asked, leaning against a crystalline pillar, her arms crossed. Naruto's golden eyes traced a line across the map, "Common. To rest on a collection of islands to the east. The land of water," he said. "A nation still healing from the scars of a brutal past. I have contacts there. People who value peace." One of them sent a request for aid. He zoomed in on the map, and the image of a small, coastal town appeared. The port of Kiraame. It's a grimy, forgotten place, but it's a vital trade hub. For the past several months, people have been disappearing. Not just one or two. Dozens. Merchants, sailors, entire families. They vanish without a trace. Gwen stepped closer to the map, her analytical mind already kicking into gear. No bodies. No ransom notes. No witnesses. None, Naruto confirmed. The local authorities are either corrupt or incompetent, and the Mizukage's government is stretched too thin to envy. Stigate every rumor coming from a backwater port. My contact is a doctor who runs a small clinic for the poor. He's a good man, and he's afraid. Fear like his, it has a distinct texture. This is more than just a string of unfortunate events. He turned to face them, his expression unreadable. I will be gone for no more than a few days. The city will be safe. The automated defense systems are more than capable of repelling any conceivable threat. You will have everything you need here. The implication was clear. He was going. They were staying. A beat of silence passed. Then Gwen spoke, her voice firm. No. Naruto's eyebrow arched slightly. No, you're not going alone, she stated, her green eyes flashing with determination. I've spent the last week studying your world's energy systems. If there's some kind of jutsu or seal involved, I might be able to detect it. My diagnostic spells can analyze energy signatures in a way your senses might not. I can provide a tactical advantage you don't have. Lucy pushed herself off the pillar, a smirk on her face, but her amethyst eyes were serious. And who's better for undercover work than a girl who can literally become anyone or anything? You need someone to get into the places you can't, to listen to the whispers in the dark alleys. I can be a barmaid, a dockworker, a rat in the walls. You need intel. I'm your girl. She jabbed a thumb at her own chest. Besides, we're a team, aren't we? Or are we just pretty houseguests you keep in your dimensional palace? The challenge hung in the air. Naruto looked at them, truly looked at them. He saw not two lost girls, but two capable, intelligent, and fiercely determined women. He had brought them into his sanctuary, shown them his utopia. But they were right. If they were to truly understand him, they had to understand the world he was trying to save, in all its broken, ugly reality. Keeping them here, shielded and protected, would be an insult to their strength. The world outside these walls is not like Edelgird, he warned, his voice a low, somber whisper. It is a harsh and unforgiving place. It is filled with cruelty, corruption, and a darkness that can stain the soul. We've faced our share of darkness. Naruto, Gwen replied, her voice unwavering. Vilgax, the hybrid, the scare. We're not fragile. We can handle it, Lucy added, her smirk softening into a look of resolute trust. With you watching our backs, we can handle anything. A slow smile spread across Naruto's face, a genuine, warm expression that made the golden fire in his eyes dance. It was a look of profound respect and dawning affection. He had been alone for so long, the solitary guardian of his dream. The idea of having true partners, of sharing the burden, was a concept so foreign and so alluring that it resonated deep within his soul. Very well, he said, his voice imbued with a new warmth. Pack what you need. We leave in 1 hour. But be warned, he added, his smile fading into a look of grim seriousness. Once you see the world as it is, you can never unsee it. The transition was as jarring as he had promised. One moment, they were stepping through a shimmering portal in Edelgard's transport nexus. The next, they were standing in a damp, reeking alleyway in the heart of Kiraame. The change in atmosphere was a physical assault on the senses. The clean, ionized air of their sanctuary was replaced by the thick, cloying stench of low tide, rotting fish, cheap booze, and unwashed bodies. The gentle, melodic hum of the city was gone, replaced by the creak of damp wood, the distant, mournful cry of a foghorn, and the drunken, angry shouts echoing from a nearby tavern. A thick, gray fog rolled in from the sea, blanketing the town in a shroud of oppressive gloom. It clung to the grimy, salt-stained wooden buildings that leaned against each other as if for support, their timbers dark with perpetual damp. The cobblestone streets were slick with a foul-smelling slime, and shadowy figures lurked in doorways, their faces hidden by the gloom, their eyes tracking the newcomers with a mixture of suspicion and predatory interest. Gwen pulled her jacket tighter around herself, a shiver running down her spine that had nothing to do with the cold. Okay, she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. He wasn't exaggerating. This place feels diseased. She could feel the ambient mana of the area, and it was sluggish, polluted with emotions of fear, despair, and simmering violence. It was like trying to breathe spiritual smog. Lucy's usual bubbly demeanor was replaced by a tense, watchful stillness. Her eyes, sharper and more perceptive than a normal human's, darted everywhere, cataloging every shadow, every potential threat. It's the quiet, she whispered. For a port town, it's too quiet. People are scared to even breathe too loud here. Naruto stood between them, a pillar of calm in the sea of misery. He was dressed in simple, practical traveler's clothes, dark pants, a gray tunic, and a heavy, hooded cloak that obscured his features and masked his vibrant hair. To the casual observer, he was just another wanderer. But to Gwen and Lucy, the raw, controlled power emanating from him was a comforting beacon in the oppressive gloom. "Fear is a poison," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It seeps into the wood, into the stones. This town has been sick for a long time. The disappearances are just a symptom." He led them out of the alley and onto the main thoroughfare. The few people they saw scurried along the edges of the street, their heads down, their eyes averted. No one made eye contact. No one spoke. The silence was indeed the most unnerving part. A port should be a place of boisterous life, of sailors' songs and merchants, haggles. Kiraame was a ghost of a town, haunted by its own living residents. Their destination was a dilapidated inn called the Drowned Rat. The name was fitting. The place smelled of stale beer and regret. The innkeeper, a large, greasy man with a face like a collapsed pudding, barely grunted as Naruto paid for 2 rooms with a handful of ryo. He didn't ask for their names. He didn't want to know. Once the why were in the relative privacy of their rooms, which were small, damp, and only marginally cleaner than the alley, they began to plan. "Gwen," Naruto began, his voice low and conspiratorial, "I need you to get a feel for the town's energy. Don't use any overt spells. Something subtle, a scrying ritual, perhaps. Look for any concentrations of unnatural energy, any place that feels wrong. Particular. Why any kind of sealing jutsu or advanced technology that wouldn't belong in a town like this?" Gwen nodded, already pulling a small, leather-bound book and a set of polished runestones from her bag. "I can set up a cartomancy array. It's slow, but it's practically undetectable. It'll give me a mystical map of the town's emotional and energetic hotspots." Naruto then turned to Lucy. "Lucy, you have the most dangerous job. I need you to become one of them. A dock worker, a serving girl, it doesn't matter. Get inside the taverns, the guild halls. Listen to the whispers. People are afraid to talk to outsiders. But they'll talk to each other. Find out which names are spoken in hushed tones, which places are avoided after dark. I need to know who holds the real power in this town." Lucy's expression was grimly determined. A mischievous grin touched her lips. "Don't worry. By tonight, I'll know everyone's dirty little secrets." Her form shimmered, and in her place stood a young, world-weary woman with stringy brown hair. A smudge of dirt on her cheek, and clothes that looked like they had been slept in for a week. Even her posture had changed, her shoulders slumped in a picture of defeated resignation. The transformation was so perfect, so absolute, that it was chilling. "And you?" Gwen asked, looking up from her runestones. "I am going to see my friend," Naruto said. "Dr. Kenji. His clinic is on the other side of town. I need to get a first-hand account of the disappearances and find out what he knows. We'll meet back here after midnight. Stay out of sight. Don't engage anyone unless absolutely necessary. This town is a predator. Don't act like prey." With that, he slipped out of the room, his hooded form melting into the foggy streets as if he were a part of them. Lucy, now in her guise as Hannah, a recently fired fish gutter, found her way to the seediest tavern on the waterfront, the Barnacle's Bite. The air inside was thick enough to chew, a foul concoction of cheap sake, sweat, and despair. She secured a job washing dishes with a sob story and a willingness to work for scraps. For hours, she kept her head down, her ears open. The talk was of dwindling fish stocks, cheating merchants, and the ever-present, suffocating fear. The disappearances were a taboo topic. When a drunken sailor started to talk about his friend who had vanished from the docks 2 nights ago, he was quickly and violently silenced by a sharp look from the brutish bartender. But Lucy was patient. She listened to the silences, to the words that weren't said. She noted how everyone, from the toughest sailor to the most desperate prostitute, would flinch whenever the name, Kiraame, was mentioned. Kiraame was a wealthy merchant who owned the largest warehouse on the docks. He had risen from poverty to immense wealth in a remarkably short time. People said he was untouchable, that he had the local constabulary in his pocket. And she noticed that the handful of guards who wore the Kiraame crest on their armor were different from the local thugs. They were disciplined, cold-eyed professionals. They moved with a silent efficiency that screamed of formal training. Gwen, meanwhile, sat in the lotus position on the floor of their grimy room. The runestones were laid out before her on a silk cloth, forming a complex pattern. Her eyes were closed, her hands glowing with a soft, light as she poured her mana into the array. She was not just reading the energy of the town, she was tasting it. She felt the baseline misery, the constant thrum of anxiety. But beneath it, she detected something else. A faint, almost imperceptible hum. It was a high-frequency energy signature, artificial and clinical. It was not jutsu, it felt more like technology. And it was strongest near the dockyards. Specifically in the area where a large, foreboding warehouse stood, a warehouse that, according to the town map she had memorized, belonged to Kiraame Enterprises. There was also a faint trace of something else there. A residue of containment magic, designed to suppress and mask what was inside. Naruto's visit to Dr. Kenji was somber. The old doctor, a man with kind, weary eyes and hands gnarled by a lifetime of healing, was overjoyed and terrified to see him. In the sterile quiet of his small clinic, he told Naruto the stories. A fisherman and his 2 sons, vanished from their boat. A weaver and her daughter, taken from their home in the middle of the night. A traveling merchant, last seen heading towards the Kiraame warehouse. The pattern was erratic, targeting both locals and outsiders, rich and poor. There was no discernible motive. Kenji also confirmed that the local constabulary had dismissed every report, labeling them as runaways or accidents at sea. "It's him, Naruto-sama," the old doctor whispered, his voice trembling. "It has to be Kiraame. He came here with nothing 5 years ago. Now he owns half the town. He bleeds us dry with his exorbitant fees, and anyone who stands up to him, they disappear. But no one dares to speak against him. We are all trapped in his web." Kenji also provided a crucial piece of information. The warehouse had a new addition, a deep, reinforced basement. Built by workers brought in from outside the land of water, all of whom had left as soon as the job was complete. They reconvened in the dead of night, the fog outside, so thick it seemed to swallow all sound. The room was lit by a single, flickering candle. "It's the Kiraame warehouse," they all said, almost in unison. They quickly shared their findings. Lucis in. Telephone on Kiraame's untouchable status and his professional guards, Gwen's detection of advanced technology and containment magic, and Naruto's confirmation from Dr. Kenji. It all pointed to the same place. "This is more than just a few kidnappings," Gwen concluded, her expression grim. "The energy signature I detected, it's consistent with power-dampening technology, something designed to suppress bioenergy. On this world, that would mean chakra, human trafficking," Naruto said, his voice cold as ice. "But for what purpose? To sell as slaves, or something worse?" Those professional guards, their movements were familiar. They are ex-shinobi, mercenaries from the bingo books. Kiraame is not the master here. He's a middleman. "So, we're not just dealing with a corrupt merchant," Lucy said, her human disguise melting away to reveal her true, determined face. "We're dealing with a clandestine organization of rogue ninja." "Precisely," Naruto affirmed. "A frontal assault would be foolish. They'll be expecting it, and they likely have the missing people held hostage inside. We have to be smart. We have to be silent." He looked at the 2 of them, the flickering candlelight casting dancing shadows on their faces. "This is where it becomes truly dangerous. Are you still with me?" Gwen met his gaze without hesitation. "To the end." Lucy cracked her knuckles, a predatory grin spreading across her face. "Let's go crash their party." The plan they formulated was one of elegant, deadly simplicity, a 3-pronged infiltration that played to each of their strengths. Their target, the Kiraame warehouse, was a black, monolithic structure squatting on the edge of the docks, looking more like a fortress than a storage facility. Mercenary guards patrolled the perimeter with a disciplined rhythm. Phase 1 belonged to Lucy. She had spent the evening studying the guards' patrol patterns, their mannerisms, their voices. She melted into the shadows near the rear entrance, waiting for the shift change. As one guard rounded a corner, a crate, seemingly dislodged by the wind, fell from a high stack, creating a loud crash. It was a simple distraction, but effective. As the guards in the area converged on the sound, Lucy flowed from the shadows, her form shifting and reforming. In seconds, She was a perfect replica of the guard who had been patrolling the rear, right down to the scar above his left eye. The real guard was unconscious, bound, and gagged in a pile of discarded nets before he even knew what was happening. Lucy, as the guard, walked with a confident stride to the rear entrance. She exchanged a gruff, coded pleasantry with the men stationed there, a code she had overheard earlier, and they let her pass without a second thought. She was in. Phase 2 was Gwen's. From a rooftop across the street, she closed her eyes, her hands glowing with a faint, intricate lattice of pink energy. Erwina's veil of misdirection, she whispered. It wasn't an invisibility spell. Those were too easy to detect with chakra senses. This was more subtle. The spell blanketed the area around the warehouse in a thin layer of mana that would gently nudge the perceptions of the guards. A flicker of movement in their peripheral vision would be dismissed as a trick of the fog. A faint sound would be attributed to the creaking of the docks. She was not making Naruto invisible, she was making the guards' own senses lie to them. Phase 3 was Naruto. With Gwen's spell providing cover, he moved. He was not just stealthy, he was a ghost. He flowed over the rooftop, his feet making no sound. He descended the wall of the warehouse like a drop of water, his chakra holding him fast to the damp wood. He moved through the patrol routes, a shadow within shadows. He didn't kill the guards. He didn't need to. A single, precise tap to the base of the neck, a pinpoint injection of his own chakra, and they would slump to the ground, their nervous systems temporarily shut down, their memories of the last few minutes erased. He moved with a terrifying, ballistic grace, a predator of absolute competence. He met Lucy inside. She gave him a subtle nod, pointing towards a large, reinforced hatch in the floor. The entrance to the new basement. It was locked with a heavy, mechanical bolt and a glowing seal. Gwen's voice whispered in their minds, a simple telepathic link she had established. The seal is technological, it's keyed to the guard's chakra signatures. Lucy, you should be able to open it. Lucy placed her hand on the seal. Focusing, she mimicked the chakra signature of the guard she had replaced. The seal glowed green, and with a heavy clank, the bolt retracted. Together, she and Naruto lifted the heavy hatch. A wave of cold, sterile air, tinged with the metallic scent of blood and chemicals, washed over them. They descended a steep, metal staircase into a scene from a nightmare. The basement was a large, white, clinically lit room. And it was filled with cages. In each cage was a person, sometimes two. All of them unconscious. Men, women, children. The missing people of Kiraame. Each one had a strange, metallic collar fastened around their neck, a single red light blinking rhythmically. My God, Gwen's voice whispered, filled with horror. She was now seeing through Naruto's eyes, thanks to their link. Naruto's calm finally broke. A wave of cold, silent fury emanated from him. So powerful that Lucy instinctively took a step back. The golden light in his eyes blazed with a righteous, terrifying intensity. They're not just suppressing their chakra, he said, his voice a low, deadly growl. They're draining it, draining them of their very life force. Suddenly, a slow, mocking clap echoed from the far end of the room. A figure stepped out from behind a stack of medical equipment. He was a tall, wiry man in a lab coat, his face thin and cruel, a pair of spectacles perched on his sharp nose. This was not Kiraame. This was someone far more dangerous. Bravo, the man said, his voice smooth and condescending. A most impressive infiltration. The shapeshifter is a delightful novelty, and the silent takedown of my guards was elegant. But I'm afraid your little rescue mission ends here. Behind him, heavy metal shutters slammed down, sealing the exits. 6 more figures emerged from the shadows. These were not the common mercenaries from upstairs. They were clad in advanced, form-fitting body armor, and their faces were hidden by blank, white masks. They radiated a cold, lethal aura. Gwen's voice was tense in their minds. Naruto, their armor, is infused with some kind of chakra-disrupting technology. My magic is having a hard time getting a lock on them, and your normal attacks might be less effective. The man in the lab coat pushed his glasses up his nose. My name is Dr. Aris. A pleasure to make your acquaintance. These collars are my own invention. They drain the chakra from these specimens, and store it in a refined, highly potent liquid form. It's a miracle drug for those shinobi wealthy enough to afford a boost. And you, my dear Jinchuriki, he said, his eyes glinting with a manic hunger as he looked at Naruto, are the ultimate specimen. Your chakra could power a small nation for a year. I will enjoy studying you. Naruto's fury settled, cooling into a diamond-hard resolve. You speak of them as specimens, he said, his voice dangerously quiet. You experiment on children. You are a cancer upon this world. And I am the cure. The fight was an explosion of motion. The 6 masked soldiers moved with terrifying speed, their armor crackling with disruptive energy. 2 went for Naruto, 2 for Lucy. The last 2 raised high-tech rifles and opened fire on Naruto. Naruto didn't even try to dodge. A translucent, golden shield of celestial energy flared into existence around him, the energy bolts dissipating harmlessly against it. He met the charge of the 2 soldiers, his movements a blur of indigo and black. He did not meet their armored fists with his own. He flowed around them, his hands striking not their armor, but the minute gaps at their joints, the neck, the elbows, the knees. Each strike was infused with a tiny, precise burst of phoenix fire. Not enough to kill, but enough to melt the complex circuitry beneath the armor. One soldier's arm locked up, useless. The other's leg gave out, sending him crashing to the floor. Lucy, meanwhile, was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. She didn't try to fight the soldiers head-on. She was a moving target, her body liquefying, stretching, and reforming. She became a puddle of goo, sliding under their legs, then solidified behind them, her fists, hardened to the consistency of stone, slamming into the backs of their helmets. When one tried to grab her, his hand sank into her body as if it were mud. She enveloped his arm, her semi-liquid form surging up and covering his mask, blinding and suffocating him. Gwen, though physically absent, was a crucial part of the battle. The callers are all networked. Her voice rang in their minds. They're controlled by a central console near the doctor. Destroy it, Dr. Aris, seeing his elite guard being dismantled, SNA. RLED and tapped a command into a wrist-mounted device. The red lights on the prisoners' collars began to blink faster. A high-pitched whining sound filled the room. If I can't have you, then I'll just take a final, massive dose from them. He shrieked. Their deaths will still make me a very wealthy man. Naruto's head snapped towards Aris, his eyes blazing. No, he vanished. He didn't run. Imply ceased to be in one place and appeared directly in front of the console, his hand raised. He slammed his palm down, not on the console itself, but on the floor beside it. A complex, golden Fuin jutsu array spread out from his hand like a spiderweb of light, covering the entire floor of the basement in an instant. Celestial seal. Harmonic reversal. The seal pulsed once, a wave of pure, benevolent energy washing through the room. The whining sound from the collars stopped. The blinking red lights turned a soft, gentle blue. Naruto hadn't destroyed them. He had hijacked them. He had reversed the flow of energy. The collars were now drawing ambient energy from the air and slowly, gently, feeding it back into the prisoners, stabilizing their life forces. Dr. Aris stared, his face a mask of disbelief. Impossible. My technology is flawless. You can't just. He was cut off as Lucy, having dispatched her opponents, wrapped a gooey tendril around his legs and yanked, sending him crashing to the floor. The battle was over. It had lasted less than a minute. Later, as the honest members of the Kirigakure Shinobi Corps, summoned by a silent, untraceable phoenix fire messenger Naruto had sent, were rounding up the unconscious mercenaries in a sputtering, defeated drive. Aris, the trio stood amongst the cages. Naruto moved from cage to cage, his hand glowing with golden light as he touched each lock. They didn't break. They simply dissolved, the metal turning to harmless dust. Gwen and Lucy helped the now stirring prisoners, offering them water and words of comfort. They saw the dawning hope in the eyes of the people they had saved, the profound, cheerful gratitude. They saw the parents clutching their children, the husbands and wives embracing. After the last prisoner had been led safely upstairs, the 3 of them were left alone in the silent, sterile room. They were exhausted, spattered with grime, but a powerful, unspoken bond now connected them. They had faced the darkness together and emerged victorious. Gwen looked at Naruto, who was staring at an empty child's cage, his expression unreadable. "You carry a heavy burden, Naruto," she said softly. He turned to her, the fire in his eyes banked now, replaced by a deep, melancholic calm. "This world is full of cages," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Some are made of steel. Others are made of fear, of hatred, of tradition. My goal is not just to break the locks, but to teach people that they have the strength to walk out of them on their own." Lucy came and stood beside him, placing a hand on his shoulder. It was a gesture of simple, solid support. "Well," she said, a small, tired smile on her face. "You don't have to do it alone anymore." Naruto looked at Lucy's hand on his shoulder, then at Gwen's look of unwavering respect. A genuine, unburdened smile touched his lips. For the first time in a long time, the crushing weight of his self-imposed duty felt a little bit lighter. In the grimy, blood-stained basement of a corrupt port town, surrounded by the ghosts of suffering, he had found something he hadn't even realized he was searching for: partnership. And in the eyes of the two extraordinary women from another world, he saw the reflection of a future that was, perhaps, a little less lonely. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Uchiha's Shadow. The return to Edelgird was like surfacing from a deep, cold dive into a sun-warmed lagoon. The oppressive, corrosive atmosphere of Kiraame washed away, replaced by the clean, life-affirming energies of Naruto's sanctuary. Yet, the experience had left an indelible mark on them all. In the days that followed, a new dynamic settled between the trio. The easy camaraderie of their first week had deepened, forged into a bond of tempered steel in the fires of shared danger. Gwen found her theoretical knowledge of dimensional energies now grounded in the harsh reality of Naruto's world. Her conversations with him were no longer just academic exercises, they were tactical debriefings. Her insights into energy manipulation now offered as a strategic asset. Lucy, while retaining her playful spirit, had a new, watchful intensity in her eyes. She had seen the ugliness that Naruto fought against, and it had solidified her respect for him into a fierce, unwavering loyalty. She no longer saw him as just an interesting, powerful host, she saw him as a cause. A righteous force in a broken world that she was proud to stand beside. They were in the gravity synthesis chamber, a vast, spherical room where the obsidian floor curved up to become the walls and ceiling, the only light a soft, golden luminescence emanating from the fuinjutsu arrays that etched its surface. Naruto had created it to simulate any conceivable combat environment. Today, however, it was a training ground. Naruto stood calmly in the center while Gwen and Lucy launched a coordinated, full-power assault. A barrage of razor-sharp mana discs, humming with destructive power, screamed towards Naruto from Gwen's left. Simultaneously, Lucy, in the form of a massive, 10-limbed beast of hardened purple cartilage and muscle, charged from his right, her movements a chaotic, unpredictable blur of brute force. It was a classic pincer movement, designed to overwhelm and divide an opponent's attention. Naruto didn't move, he didn't even seem to brace himself. His eyes, swirling with celestial fire, tracked both attacks with an unnerving, placid focus. At the very last microsecond, as the mana discs were about to slice into him and Lucis' bone-scythe appendages were poised to strike, he acted. He did not dodge, he did not block, he simply raised his right hand, palm open, towards Gwen's attack, and his left hand, palm open, towards Lucis. A miniature, swirling vortex of golden energy, no bigger than his palm, appeared before his right hand. The mana discs did not shatter against it, they were drawn into it, their violent pink energy unraveled, deconstructed, and absorbed into the vortex with a quiet, hungry hiss. Before his left hand, a flat, shimmering shield of the same golden energy materialized. Lucis' hardened limbs struck the shield with a thunderous boom that shook the very air in the chamber. But the shield did not break. It did not even ripple. It held as firm as the concept of existence itself, absorbing the kinetic force of her charge completely. The chamber fell silent. Lucy, her attack utterly negated, reformed into her human guise, her breath coming in ragged gasps from the sheer exertion. Gwen lowered her glowing hands, her expression a mixture of frustration and profound awe. "It's like trying to punch a black hole," Gwen panted, her brow furrowed in concentration. "You don't just block the energy, Naruto. You consume it. You unmake it. My spells have a structure. A syntax. You're not just negating them, you're erasing the entire sentence. Naruto lowered his hands, the golden constructs of light dissolving into nothingness. All energy has a source, Gwen. A fundamental frequency. Mana, chakra, life force, they are all just different expressions of the same universal song. I have learned to listen to the silence between the notes. He turned his gaze to Lucy. And you, Lucy, your strength is magnificent. It is the strength of life itself, adaptive, chaotic, and relentless. But you attack the object, not the principle. You tried to break the shield. You should have been trying to break my focus. Lucy wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, a wide, appreciative grin spreading across her face. So what you're saying is, next time I should try tickling you. Naruto's lips quirked into a rare, genuine smile. The unexpected is often the most effective weapon. It was in this moment of easy camaraderie that a soft, melodic chime echoed through the chamber. It was the alert from the core spire's communication hub. Naruto's smile faded slightly, replaced by a neutral, unreadable expression. He rarely received direct communications from the elemental nations. Most of his contacts used more subtle methods. A formal request meant one thing: politics. He closed his eyes for a moment, accessing the link. When he opened them, a faint, troubled light flickered in their golden depths. It is a summons, he said, his voice a flat, even tone. From the Hokage of Konaha no Sato. Konaha, the Hidden Leaf Village. Your home, Gwen said. Her tone a mixture of a statement and a question. She had learned the broad strokes of his past from the data shards in the library. It was the place of my birth, Naruto corrected gently. A home is a place of acceptance and belonging. Edelgird is my home. The distinction was quiet, but sharp as a shard of glass. The council requests my presence. A diplomatic formality. They wish to discuss the unprecedented political and military ramifications of the events in the Land of Water. Let me guess, Lucy chimed in, crossing her arms. You single-handedly dismantle a massive human trafficking ring run by a technologically advanced rogue shinobi organization, and now they want to know why you didn't ask for their permission first. That is a remarkably accurate summary, Naruto said with a dry, humorless smile. They see my power not as a force for stability, but as an untamed element that disrupts their delicate, and often corrupt, balance of power. They fear what they cannot control. And they have never been able to control me. So what are you going to do? Gwen asked, her expression serious. I will go, Naruto stated, his decision already made. Ignoring them would be seen as an act of aggression. It would give them the justification they crave to declare me a threat. I will attend their little meeting, listen to their veiled threats and hollow platitudes, and remind them, gently, that I am not one of their shinobi to be commanded. I am a sovereign power. He looked at them, his gaze softening. You are welcome to accompany me. But I will understand if you wish to remain here. Konaha can be an unwelcoming place. Gwen and Lucy exchanged a look. It was the same look of solidarity they had shared in the grimy inn room in Kiraame. We're a team, remember? Lucy said, her smirk back in place. Besides, I've always wanted to see the place that was dumb enough to let you go. Gwen nodded her agreement. I agree. And from a tactical standpoint, it would be foolish to let you walk into a potentially hostile political situation without support. Naruto looked at them, a flicker of warmth in his eyes. He had walked into the lion's den of Konaha's politics alone more times than he could count. The thought of having allies at his back, true allies who were there not out of duty or fear, but out of choice, was a novel and profoundly comforting feeling. Then so be it, he said. Prepare yourselves. We will be entering a place where the shadows have memories, and the deepest wounds are the ones that never scar. Konaha was a jarring paradox. From the sky, it looked peaceful, a sprawling village nestled in a lush, green forest, the faces of its greatest leaders carved into the mountain that watched over it like a silent god. But as their feet touched the ground just outside the main gate, Naruto felt the old, familiar weight settle upon him. It was the weight of a million judging eyes, of a childhood spent in bitter, aching loneliness. He, Gwen, and Lucy were dressed in the formal robes of Edelgird, deep indigos and blacks, simple yet elegant, marked only by the subtle golden phoenix crest. They were clothes that marked them as outsiders. as dignitaries from another, unknown power. As they walked through the gates, the bustling energy of the village seemed to falter. The cheerful chatter of merchants and the laughter of children died down, replaced by a wave of whispers that followed them like a foul odor. The stares were different now. He remembered the looks from his youth, the cold hatred, the fearful glares that had branded him as a monster. The demon in their midst. Now, the looks were more complex. The fear was still there, but it was mingled with awe. The hatred had been replaced by resentful jealousy. They were no longer looking at the Kyuubi brat. They were looking at a man who radiated a power so immense it felt like a physical presence, a man who had walked away from their village and had clearly prospered beyond their wildest imaginings. It was, in its own way, a far more satisfying form of acknowledgement than the hero worship he had once so desperately craved. Gwen walked beside him, her senses on high alert. She could feel the ambient energy of the village. It was strong, vibrant with life, but it was also fractured. She could feel the undercurrents of paranoia, the deeply ingrained military discipline that permeated every aspect of the society, the web of surveillance seals that pulsed invisibly on every rooftop. It was a gilded cage, and she could feel its bars pressing in. Lucy, for her part, maintained an air of bored indifference, but her eyes missed nothing. She saw the Anbu operatives, their animal masks doing little to hide their killing intent, flitting across the rooftops. She saw the clan shinobi, the Hyuga and the Akamichi, who subtly altered their paths to observe them. She saw the deep, ingrained suspicion in the eyes of the common villagers. This place was a hornet's nest, and they had just kicked it. Their destination was the Hokage Tower, the red, cylindrical building that was the heart of the village's power structure. They were escorted, not guided, by a squad of impassive Junin. They were led into the council chambers, a stark, windowless room designed to intimidate. The village elders, Homura and Kaharu, sat beside the Hokage's seat, their faces ancient, withered masks of stern disapproval. Danzo Shimura was there, a bandage covering one eye, his presence a pool of cold, calculating darkness in the corner of the room. And in the center seat, looking weary and older than her years, was the fifth Hokage, Tsunade Senju. Naruto, Tsunade began, her voice strained, foregoing any formal titles. It has been a long time. You look, well. I am, Naruto replied, his voice calm and respectful, yet conceding nothing. He gestured to his companions. This is Gwen Tennyson and Lucy Mann, my advisors. Kaharu sniffed disdainfully. Advisors? You are a shinobi of Konaha. Uzumaki. You do not have advisors. You have teammates and commanding officers. With all due respect, Elder Sama, Naruto said, his voice dropping a degree, becoming as cold and smooth as polished steel. I have not been a shinobi of Konaha for many years. I am here as a courtesy, at your request. My allegiance is to the peace and security of my own people, in my own home. The unspoken threat hung in the air. I am not your weapon. I am a king in my own right. Danzo spoke for the first time, his voice a dry, reptilian rasp. Your home is a phantom, a rumor. Yet your power is very real. You acted unilaterally in the Land of Water, a territory with complex political ties to Konaha. You dismantled a significant criminal enterprise without consulting us, without sharing intelligence. Such actions are destabilizing. The organization was trafficking and murdering innocent civilians, including children, Naruto retorted, his voice dangerously quiet. My actions saved dozens of lives. I fail to see how that is destabilizing. Or was Konaha's official position that those lives were an acceptable price to pay for maintaining the status quo? The barb struck home. Tsunade flinched. The elders' expressions hardened. That is not the point, Homura snapped. The point is protocol, order. You are a Jinchuriki, a power that this village nurtured and protected. Your strength belongs to Konaha. Naruto actually laughed. It was not a sound of mirth. It was a cold, empty sound that made the temperature in the room seem to drop. Protected. UCALL, a childhood of isolation and hatred, protection. You call the constant assassination attempts from your own black ops that I had to fend off in my youth, nurturing. He took a step forward, and for the first time, a fraction of his true power leaked out, a wave of pressure so immense that the elders and even Danzo paled, their breath catching in their throats. Only Tsunade, a cage in her own right, seemed able to withstand it without flinching, though her knuckles were white where she gripped the arms of her chair. "Let me be clear," Naruto said, his golden eyes blazing with a light that seemed to strip away all their political posturing and leave them naked and wanting. "I am not your beast. I am not your weapon. And I am not your lonely little boy anymore. I am here today to inform you that the events in Kiraame were not an isolated incident. I will continue to act wherever I see darkness and corruption preying on the innocent. I will not be bound by your borders or your self-serving politics. You can choose to see me as an ally in the fight for a true, lasting peace. Or you can choose to see me as an enemy. The choice is yours. But I assure you, you do not want me as an enemy." He let his power recede, the oppressive pressure vanishing as quickly as it had come. He gave a slight, formal bow. "Hokage-sama, elders, thank you for this meeting. I trust my position is now clear." Without waiting for a dismissal, he turned and walked towards the door, Gwen and Lucy falling into step beside him. He had said all that needed to be said. He had drawn his line in the sand. As they left the suffocating tension of the tower and stepped back out into the village, Naruto felt a strange sense of liberation. He had finally, completely, severed the emotional chains that had bound him to this place. He owed them nothing, but as they walked, he felt a sudden, familiar pull. A flicker of chakra so intrinsically linked to his own that it was like a phantom limb. It was a signature of fierce, brilliant lightning, of a pride as vast as the sky, and a loneliness as deep as the ocean. It was a signature he had not felt in years, but one he could never forget. "Gwen, Lucy," he said, his voice low. "Continue back to the gate. I will meet you there shortly. There is one last ghost I must face here." Gwen looked at him, her green eyes filled with a perceptive concern. She could feel the sudden shift in his emotional state, the turmoil beneath the calm surface. "Naruto, are you sure?" "I am," he said, his gaze distant, fixed on a part of the village that lay in ruins, shrouded in shadows and memory. "This is a conversation I must have alone." They trusted him. With a final, worried glance, they continued on their path, leaving him to his ghosts. Naruto altered his course, his feet carrying him with a somber, inevitable purpose towards the long-abandoned Uchiha district. The air in the Uchiha compound was cold and dead. The once proud homes were now crumbling shells, the paper screens torn and rotting, the wooden beams groaning under the weight of time and tragedy. Weeds choked the meticulously raked gardens, and a thick layer of dust covered everything, a gray shroud over a mass grave. Over it all hung a profound, suffocating silence, the kind that follows a scream. Tonight, the moon was full and high in the sky, but it was a strange, unsettling moon, tinted a deep, bloody crimson by some atmospheric anomaly. Its scarlet light bathed the ruins in an ethereal, hellish glow, making the shadows seem to writhe like living things. Naruto walked down the main street, his footsteps the only sound echoing in the oppressive quiet. He felt the ghosts here. He felt the echoes of laughter, of life, of a proud clan, all silenced in a single, horrific night. And he felt her. She was waiting for him in the district's central training ground, the place where the clan's greatest had once honed their skills. He stepped into the clearing. She was standing there, her back to him, staring up at the blood-red moon. Her form was silhouetted against its light, sharp and dangerous. She was taller, her figure lithe and athletic, clad in a simple, high-collared dark blue shirt and white shorts. The Uchiha crest proudly displayed on her back. Her black hair, once cut short, now flowed down to her mid-back, a river of midnight silk. "I felt your power the moment you entered the village," she said. Her voice a low, melodic alto, as cold and sharp as obsidian. She turned, and Naruto's breath caught in his chest. It was Sasuke Uchiha, or rather, Satsuki, as he had always known her in this life. Her face was a perfect, aristocratic porcelain mask, beautiful and terrible in its unforgiving intensity. Her features were sharper, more defined, but it was her eyes that held him. They were not the simple black of her youth. They were a blazing, blood-red, three-tomo swirling around each pupil. The Sharingan, and beneath the cold, arrogant fury in those eyes, he saw it. The same profound, soul-deep loneliness that had once defined him. "Satsuki," he breathed, her name a ghost on his lips. "You have no right to say my name," she hissed, her voice dripping with a venom that had been brewing for years. "You, who abandoned this village. You, who abandoned your comrades. You, who abandoned me." "I abandoned a cage that sought to control me," Naruto replied, his voice regaining its calm, though his heart was a tumultuous sea of old memories and new pains. "I offered you a way out, Satsuki. I offered you another path. You chose the one paved with hatred and revenge. It is the only path I have," she snarled, taking a step forward, her chakra flaring to life, crackling around her like a shroud of black lightning. "He took everything from me. My family, my future, my entire clan. Vengeance is my birthright, and power is the only tool that will allow me to claim it. Power like yours. Power you hoard for yourself in your secret kingdom, while our home rots from the inside out." "Our home." Naruto's voice was laced with a bitter irony. "Was this your home when they praised you as a genius, while they scorned me as a demon? Was it your home when the elders plotted to control your Sharingan? Just as they plotted to control my Kyuubi? This village is not a home, Satsuki. It is a machine that consumes people like us. I chose to break free of its gears. You have chosen to become one of them." Quote, her face twisted in a mask of rage. "You know nothing." In a blur of motion that was almost too fast for a normal eye to see, she was upon him, a kunai in her hand aimed at his throat. Naruto didn't flinch. He simply tilted his head to the side, the blade whispering past his skin, slicing a single, errant strand of his blonde hair. He caught her wrist, his grip gentle yet unbreakable. "Your speed has improved," he said, his voice calm, analytical. "But your heart is still full of noise. You cannot land a blow that matters." She snarled and broke away, her hand flashing through a series of seals. "Fire style. Great fireball jutsu." She inhaled, and a massive, roaring sphere of flame erupted from her lips, incinerating the very air as it hurtled towards him. Naruto simply stood his ground. Raising one hand, a wall of shimmering, golden celestial energy appeared before him, and the great fireball, a jutsu that could turn a swath of forest to ash, plashed against it like a wave against a cliff, dissolving into harmless, glittering embers. "You still rely on the old ways," Naruto said, his voice tinged with a profound disappointment. "You have not grown, Satsuki. You have only festered." That was the breaking point. With a raw, animalistic scream that was part fury and part despair, she charged him again, but this time, her right hand was a vortex of screaming, chirping lightning. The Chidori, a blade of pure, concentrated assassination chakra. But it was different now. It was not the pure white-blue lightning he remembered. It was black, tainted with the sinister, corrupting power of Orochimaru's curse mark, which spread its jagged, black patterns across the right side of her body. "I will make you see," she shrieked, her face a mask of beautiful, tragic fury. "I will carve the truth into your heart." He saw the attack coming. He saw the hatred that fueled it, the pain that gave it form. He felt a deep, aching sadness for the brilliant, broken girl who stood before him. He had no desire to harm her, but he had to make her understand. His own right hand came up, and a sphere of swirling, azure chakra appeared in his palm. The Rasengan. But like her Chidori, his Rasengan was different. It was not just wind-natured chakra. It was infused with the golden, life-giving fire of the celestial phoenix. It did not hum with destructive power, it sang with a pure, harmonic resonance. She thrust her black Chidori forward. He met it with his golden Rasengan. There was no earth-shattering explosion. No shockwave that leveled the ruins around them. When the two attacks met, something entirely different happened. Satsuki's black Chidori, a jutsu of pure, focused destructive energy, was unmade. The golden energy of Naruto's Rasengan did not overpower it. It enveloped it, soothed it, harmonized it. The screaming black lightning was calmed, its corrupt chakra purified, its form dissolving until nothing was left. Naruto's golden Rasengan, however, continued forward. Its power undiminished. He pressed his palm gently against her stomach. It was not an attack. It was a transference. A wave of pure, warm, celestial energy flooded her system, overwhelming the cold, sinister power of the curse mark. The black patterns receded from her skin with a painful hiss, retreating back to the mark on her neck as if burned by a holy light. Satsuki stumbled back, her Sharingan deactivating, her eyes wide with a mixture of shock, confusion, and a terrifying, unfamiliar vulnerability. She clutched her stomach, not in pain, but in sheer disbelief. Her ultimate attack, the culmination of her training and hatred, had been nullified. Effortlessly. He hadn't even tried to hurt her. He had healed her. The insult of it was more profound than any physical blow. She fell to her knees, her body trembling, her breath coming in ragged sobs. "Why?" she whispered, her voice broken, all the arrogance and anger shattered. "Why won't you fight me? Why won't you hate me? Why won't you just finish it?" Naruto stood over her, the blood-red moonlight casting his shadow upon her trembling form. His expression was one of infinite sadness. He knelt down, so they were at eye level. "Because hating you would be like hating my own reflection," he said, his voice soft, yet carrying an unshakable conviction. "We are the same, Satsuki. Two lonely souls who were given a power we never asked for, in a world that sought to use us as tools. The only difference is the path we chose to walk." He reached out, his hand hesitating for a moment before. He gently brushed a tear from her cheek with his thumb. Her skin was cold. "Your brother is not the only one who stole your future," he murmured. "This village, its system, its secrets, they all played a part. But vengeance will not bring them back. It will only burn away what little is left of you until you are nothing but ash." She looked at him, her black eyes, now free of the Sharingan's curse, shimmering with unshed tears. She saw no pity in his golden gaze. She saw no arrogance. She saw only a deep, painful understanding. And for the first time in a very, very long time, the armor of hatred around her heart began to crack. He stood up, turning to leave. "Where are you going?" she asked, her voice small, like a lost child's. "I am going home," he said, without looking back. "And I am leaving you with a choice, Satsuki. Continue down this dark, lonely path until it consumes you, or find a new one. Find a reason to live, not just a reason to die. My door will always be open. But why? Oh, you are the one who has to choose to walk through it." He walked away, leaving her kneeling in the rubble of her past, under the light of the bleeding moon. He did not look back. He could not. The ghost he had come to face was not just hers. It was his own, a phantom of a bond he had refused to let die. He met Gwen and Lucy at the village gates. They said nothing. They didn't have to. They had felt the seismic shift in his spirit. The sorrow and the hope that now warred within him. Lucy simply fell into step on one side of him, and Gwen on the other. Their silent, unwavering presence was all the comfort he needed. As they stepped out of the gates of Konaha, leaving the village and its ghosts behind them, Naruto knew that this chapter of his life was finally, truly, over. But a new one far more complex and dangerous, had just begun. Because he knew, with a certainty that resonated in the celestial fire of his soul, that this would not be the last time he saw Satsuki Uchiha. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Sound of Redemption. The ambient, life-affirming hum of Edelgird did little to soothe the disquiet in Naruto's soul. The confrontation with Satsuki had stirred a phantom limb of memory and pain. An ache that resonated with the lonely boy he had once been. He stood on the balcony of his private quarters in the core spire, the breathtaking panorama of his perfect city spread before him. Yet his gaze was turned inward, replaying the flicker of shattered vulnerability in Satsuki's eyes under the bleeding moon. He had offered her a choice, a key to a door she had long ago forgotten existed. But the act of offering it had forced him to acknowledge the weight of his own keys, the solitude of the path he had chosen. Behind him, the crystalline door whispered open. He didn't need to turn to know who it was. The crisp, ordered scent of Gwen's mana and the wild, unpredictable tang of Lucis morphing biology were as familiar to him now as the feel of celestial fire in his veins. Staring contests with nebulae rarely solve existential crises, Lucy commented, her tone unusually soft. She came to lean against the balustrade beside him, her usual kinetic energy replaced by a quiet, solid presence. Gwen stood on his other side, her arms crossed, her expression analytical but softened with genuine concern. "Your biosignature is turbulent. The harmonic resonance of your celestial chakra is fluctuating. That encounter affected you more than you're letting on." Naruto let out a slow, measured breath, the air shimmering faintly with golden light as it left his lips. "She is a mirror," he said, his voice a low murmur that seemed to be pulled from a place of profound weariness. "A reflection of a past I have worked diligently to transcend. In her, I see the rage I could have embraced, the bitterness I could have drowned in. To face her is to face the ghost of my own potential for darkness." "But you didn't embrace it," Gwen stated, her voice firm with conviction. "That's the point, isn't it? You faced the same darkness and chose to build all of this." She gestured to the city, to the sanctuary he had forged from his pain. "That's not a ghost, Naruto. That's a victory that feels hollow when someone you once considered family is still lost in the war," he countered, his gaze unwavering. Lucy nudged his arm gently. "Hey, Zen Master, you did what you could. You opened the door. You can't force her to walk through it. That ain't your job." She paused, her amethyst eyes searching his face. "But you don't have to stand watch over it alone anymore. That's our job." The simple, unvarnished sincerity of her words struck a chord deep within him. He looked at Lucy's unwavering, loyal gaze, and at Gwen's look of fierce, intellectual support. He had spent so long as a solitary pillar, believing he had to bear the weight of his world alone. The realization that the pillar now had buttresses, strong and beautiful in their own right, was a paradigm shift that settled a part of the storm within him. He gave them a small, grateful smile, the turbulence in his eyes calming into a familiar, steady glow. It was precisely in that moment of shared, Q-U-I-E-T connection that the chime echoed through the spire. It was not the formal, melodic tone of a diplomatic summons, but a sharp, urgent, triple-beat alarm that Naruto had not heard in years. It was a Priority 1 quarantine alert. His calm expression sharpened into one of focused intensity. He turned from the balcony, striding back into his command center, a room that was a seamless fusion of organic wood and holographic interfaces. A large, shimmering display materialized in the center of the room, showing a single, pulsating red dot within a sterilized, white containment field. "What is it?" Gwen asked, her mind already shifting into tactical mode. "A failsafe," Naruto explained, his fingers dancing across the holographic controls, bringing up streams of complex data. "Years ago, I placed a series of highly advanced space-time sensor seals on Orochimaru's primary laboratories and strongholds. They were designed to remain dormant, undetectable. Their purpose was to alert me if the structural integrity of the base failed and to perform an emergency, last resort extraction of any unique life signs before their destruction." "You bugged the snake's lairs," Lucy said with an appreciative whistle. "Smart. One of them just triggered," Naruto continued, his golden eyes narrowing as he read the data. "The mountain of Fang's stronghold. A catastrophic internal collapse. The entire base has been destroyed. But just before the final cave-in, the seal detected one life sign. Faint, critically unstable. The subject's biological and chakra signatures are heavily corrupted." He brought up a file, and a familiar, snarling face appeared on the screen. A girl with wild, dark red hair, a defiant sneer, and eyes that burned with a feral rage. "A member of the Sound 4. Chiyuya." Gwen's eyes widened in recognition. She was part of the squad that tried to retrieve Satsuki Uchiha. Highly skilled in sound-based genjutsu. C-rank criminal in the Konaha bingo books. Presumed deceased AF. Chair her battle with Shikamaru Nara and Tamari. Apparently, that presumption was incorrect, Naruto said grimly. The display shifted to a live feed of the quarantine chamber. Chiyuya was lying on a sterile medical slab, unconscious. She was horrifically injured. Her body was covered in deep lacerations and severe burns, one arm was bent at an unnatural angle, and dark, venomous-looking veins pulsed around the curse mark on her neck. A sign that its power was running rampant, consuming its host. "She's dying. The curse mark is devouring her from the inside out, and her injuries are too severe for even her enhanced physiology to heal." Quote, Lucy grimaced. "Yikes. Looks like her boss's retirement plan had some serious flaws. What are you going to do?" Gwen asked, her tone serious. She looked the data streams detailing Chiyuya's crimes to the pathetic, broken figure on the slab. "Logically, she's an enemy combatant. A terrorist. She's a security risk of the highest order. But she's also a victim," Naruto countered softly, his gaze fixed on the screen. "A child soldier, taken from the streets, twisted and weaponized by a monster. Orochimaru didn't raise subordinates, he forged tools. And when those tools broke, he discarded them. He zoomed in onto Yuya's face. Even in unconsciousness, it was a mask of pain and defiance. He saw the same trapped, feral spirit he had seen in so many others, including himself, long ago. You can't be thinking of helping her, Gwen argued, though her voice lacked its usual certainty. The events in Kiraame had complicated her black and white view of the world. The risk of betrayal is immense. Her psychological conditioning will run deep. Every soul deserves the chance to choose its own path, Naruto stated, his voice quiet but absolute. Satsuki's path is still shrouded in darkness. Perhaps I can illuminate another's. He turned off the display, his decision made. I will not let her die. But I will not simply heal her and imprison her. Punishment is a crude and ineffective tool for a broken spirit. It only reinforces the cage. So what's the alternative? Lucy asked, intrigued. Group therapy and a basket of muffins. Naruto's lips quirked into a faint smile. Something a little more tailored to her specific needs. He turned and began to walk, his indigo robe swirling around him. Follow me. I wish to show you true justice is administered in Edelgird. He led them not to a prison, but to a part of the city they had never seen before. It was a vast, serene garden, a place of impossible beauty. A gentle, mist-filled river flowed through a landscape of weeping willow-like trees whose leaves were made of shimmering, silver light. The ground was a carpet of soft, glowing moss, and floating, crystalline stones hummed with a low, meditative frequency. In the center of the garden was a single, simple, unadorned torii gate, crafted from the pale, smooth wood of the Edelgardian spires. It seemed to lead nowhere, standing alone in a clearing. This is the sanctuary of the lost, Naruto explained, his voice hushed in the tranquil atmosphere. And this, he said, gesturing to the gate, is the entrance to the labyrinth of the self. A labyrinth, Gwen murmured, her senses tingling. She could feel an immense, complex web of psycho-receptive fuinjutsu and celestial energy woven into the gate. As a construct of breathtaking complexity. What is its purpose? It is not a place of punishment. It is a place of confrontation, Naruto said. When a soul is brought here, the labyrinth reads their psyche, their memories, their fears, their pain. It then generates a personalized, metaphysical reality, a landscape of their own soul. To escape, they must walk the path of their own life, confront the demons they have created or embraced, and find the true core of who they are. Lucy whistled, her eyes wide. So it's like a personalized, high-tech haunted house for your soul. That's seriously messed up. And seriously cool. It is dangerous, Naruto warned. The constructs within are illusions, but the psychological and spiritual toll is very real. The labyrinth does not judge. It only reflects. Some souls become lost within it forever, chasing their own ghosts in an endless loop. Others emerge, broken but whole, stripped of their self-deceptions, ready to begin healing. He turned to them, his golden eyes serious. I am going to stabilize Yuya's body. And then, I am going to enter the labyrinth with her. You're going in there with her? Gwen exclaimed, her composure finally breaking. Naruto, that's insane. You'd be subjecting yourself to her psychic backlash, her trauma. Her inner world must be a nightmare. It could infect you, corrupt your own mind. I will not be a passive observer. Naruto stated calmly. I will be her guide. I will not fight her demons for her. That is a battle she must win on her own. But I will act as a shield, an anchor to reality, protecting her from the labyrinth's most lethal manifestations and ensuring she does not lose herself completely. I will force her to face the truth she has spent her entire life screaming to avoid. Why? Lucy asked, her voice soft. Why risk so much for a foul-mouthed little monster who would have killed you without a second thought? Naruto looked at the serene, silent gate, but his thoughts were far away, in a dark alley. On a lonely swing, in a village full of hateful glares. Because no one ever risked anything for me, he said simply. And that is a cycle I intend to break. The transition into the labyrinth was not a physical movement, but a dissolution of reality. One moment, Naruto was standing before the torii gate, his hand resting on the shoulder of a now physically stabilized but still unconscious Yuya. The next, the tranquil garden dissolved into a cacophony of sensory overload. They were standing in a place of jarring, impossible geometry. It was an alleyway that twisted in on itself, the grimy brick walls covered in weeping, profane graffiti that shifted and rewrote itself in languages of pure hate. The sky above was a shattered mirror, reflecting 1,000 distorted images of a terrified child's face. The dominant, overwhelming sensation, however, was sound. It was a dissonant, agonizing symphony, the screech of rusty metal, the cruel laughter of bullies. The agonizing whisper of an empty stomach, the sharp, clinical clatter of medical tools, and over it all, a single, endlessly repeating, soul-crushing word: weak. Weak, weak, weak. Chiyuya was on her knees, her hands clamped over her ears, her body trembling violently. The labyrinth had awakened her. Her eyes were wide with a primal terror, darting around at the hellscape her own subconscious had built. What is this? Where the hell am I? She shrieked, her voice raw and hoarse. Is this one of Orochimaru's goddamn genjutsu experiments? This is not a genjutsu, Chiyuya. Naruto's voice cut through the cacophony, a single, clear, resonant note in the sea of noise. This is you. She scrambled backwards, her eyes finally focusing on him. She saw not the blonde-haired genin she had once dismissed, but a tall figure robed in impossible darkness, his eyes burning like two miniature suns. He was an anchor of terrifying calm in her personal storm. Uzumaki. She snarled, her fear instantly transmuting into her more familiar armor of rage. What did you do to me, you son of a bitch? I'll kill you. I'll tear you apart and feed your guts to the crows. Your threats are meaningless here, Naruto said, his voice unpitying. Your anger is a shield. A loud, predictable noise to drown out the silence you truly fear. This labyrinth has only one exit. To find it, you must walk its path. The path begins with your first choice. As he spoke, the alleyway ahead of them split. One path led into a dark, foreboding tenement building, from which the cruel laughter of children echoed. The other path led towards a sterile, white door, from behind which came the clinical clatter of metal tools and the faint, reptilian hiss of a snake. Her past, or her savior. There is no choice. Chiyuya spat, scrambling to her feet. There's only survival, and I survived because I chose power. She stumbled towards the white door, towards the source of her curse mark, the source of her strength. Orochimaru-sama gave me the power to crush anyone who ever looked down on me. He gave you a leash, Naruto corrected, his voice echoing in the twisted space. And it is choking the life out of you. She ignored him, throwing open the white door and plunging through. Naruto followed, a silent, watchful shadow. The room beyond was a perfect, horrifying recreation of one of Orochimaru's labs. Cages lined the walls, filled with the ghostly, weeping figures of failed experiments. In the center of the room, strapped to a cold, metal table, was a younger version of Chiyuya, small, emaciated, her eyes wide with terror and defiance. A spectral, smiling Orochimaru loomed over her, a large, sinister-looking needle in his hand. Such wonderful spirit, the Orochimaru construct hissed, its voice a perfect imitation. Such a rare vessel for my gift. This power will let you silence all your little pains, my dear. It will make you strong. See, the real Chiyuya screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the scene. He saved me. He made me strong. Look closer, Naruto commanded, his voice sharp. He raised a hand, and a wave of golden energy washed over the scene. The illusion wavered, and for a second, the image changed. The needle in Orochimaru's hand was no longer a tool of empowerment, but a chain. The gift he was injecting was not power, but servitude. The curse mark was not a crest of strength, but a brand of ownership. The illusion snapped back, but the seed of truth had been planted. Chiyuya stumbled back, her hand flying to the curse mark on her neck. It felt dirty, tainted, lies, she shrieked, and in her rage, she brought her hands to her lips, channeling her chakra. She was about to play her demonic flute. But as she tried to summon it, nothing happened. Your genjutsu is useless here. Naruto's voice explained. Your flute creates illusions of sound to trap the mind. But this place is already an illusion. You cannot lie to a lie. The only weapon you have here, he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, is the truth. Enraged and disarmed, Tayuya did the only thing she knew how to do. She attacked. She lunged at Naruto, her fists and feet a clumsy, desperate flurry of strikes. Naruto didn't even bother to raise a hand to block. He moved like water, flowing around her attacks, her blows passing through the space where he had been a moment before. He was untouchable, his movements an effortless, frustrating dance of avoidance. After a minute of her exhausting herself against his impossible grace, he caught her fist, his grip gentle but absolute. "Your rage is a fire," he said, his golden eyes looking not at her, but through her, into the frightened child cowering within. "It keeps you warm, but it is also burning down your own house, with you inside it. You must let it go." "Never," she spat, trying to wrench her hand free. "Then you will burn," he said simply. He released her and turned away, walking back out into the cacophonous alley. "This is your labyrinth, Tayuya. Your prison. You can stay in this room, replaying the lie of your salvation for eternity, or you can face the noise outside." He left her there. He knew he had to. This was her battle. He was only the guide. He waited in the alley, the symphony of her pain washing over him, and he listened. For a long, agonizing time, there was only the sound of her ragged, angry sobs from within the lab. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she emerged, her face pale, tear-streaked, but her eyes held a new, terrified uncertainty. She had taken the first step. He led her through the shifting, nightmarish landscape of her own memories. He did not speak. He simply walked, a constant, unwavering presence at her side. She was forced to witness the ghostly reenactments of her life on the streets, the beatings, the starvation, the betrayals. She saw every act of cruelty she had suffered, and every act of cruelty she had inflicted in turn, a desperate cycle of violence born of fear. The labyrinth's final test was in a place of absolute silence. It was a vast, empty, black void. There was no up, no down, no sound, no sensation. It was the silence she had always feared, the silence of being utterly, completely alone. In the center of the void was a single, spectral object, her flute. "What is this?" she whispered, her voice sounding unnaturally loud in the crushing emptiness. "This is your core," Naruto's voice echoed from the darkness around her. "Your music. It is the one thing that was truly yours. You used it to create pain, to control others, to build your walls. But that is not its only purpose. A song can also heal. It can create. It can give hope." As he spoke, a second figure materialized in the void. It was a perfect, spectral copy of herself, but its eyes were hollow. Its face a mask of snarling hatred. It picked up the flute. "There is no hope," the doppelganger hissed, its voice her own, but twisted with venom. "There is only noise. There is only rage. That is all we are. We are the monster they made us." The double put the flute to its lips and began to play. But the music that came out was not her demonic melodies. It was a single, pure, agonizing note of pure despair. It was the sound of a lonely child crying in an alley. It was the sound of a soul in agony. The sound tore at Tayuya, resonating with the deepest parts of her, threatening to shatter her sanity. She clamped her hands over her ears, screaming, "Make it stop! Make it stop! I cannot!" Naruto's voice replied, filled with a profound, painful empathy. "Only you can. This is your song, Tayuya. This is the truth you have been hiding from. You must answer it." The doppelganger continued to play, the note of despair growing louder, more intense. The void around them began to crack, to fracture under the strain of so much concentrated pain. The labyrinth was collapsing. "Listen to it," the double shrieked. "Listen to our pain. Drown in it." Tayuya was on the verge of breaking, her spirit about to be annihilated by the sheer weight of her own sorrow. But then, through the agonizing wail, she heard another sound. Faint, distant. It was the clear, resonant note of Naruto's voice, not speaking words, but humming a simple, gentle melody. It was not a song of power or of battle. It was a lullaby, a song of peace. It did not fight her note of despair. It harmonized with it, weaving around it, cradling it, giving it a context beyond mere agony. She looked up, her tear-filled eyes finding Naruto, who was now visible, standing a short distance away, a soft, golden aura surrounding him. He was not fighting her darkness. He was offering it a place to rest. The choice was finally, terrifyingly, clear. She could let her despair consume her, or she could try, for the first time in her life, to write a new song. With a ragged, desperate cry, she lunged forward, not at Naruto, but at her double. She did not strike it. She embraced it, pulling the hateful, weeping specter of herself into a hug. I hear you, she sobbed, her own tears flowing freely. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It's okay. You don't have to be strong anymore. You don't have to be alone. As she spoke the words, the doppelganger, her pain, her hatred, dissolved in her arms, not into nothingness, but into a shower of soft, warm light that flowed into her, filling the empty, aching parts of her soul. The agonizing note of despair softened, its sharp edges smoothed away, and it faded into a profound, peaceful silence. The black void dissolved. They were back in the serene garden of the Sanctuary of the Lost. Standing before the silent Torii Gate, the sun of Edelgird was dawning, casting long, gentle rays through the leaves of silver light. Chiyuya stood there, trembling, her face washed clean by her tears. The feral, hateful fire in her eyes was gone. In its place was a fragile, terrified, but undeniably hopeful spark. She looked at Naruto, at the being who had walked through her personal hell with her and had not judged her, had not condemned her, but had simply listened. She opened her mouth, the reflexive profanity, the usual snarled insult, dying on her lips. For the first time, she had no words. Instead, she did the most unexpected thing of all. She took a hesitant step forward, and another, and then she buried her face in the front of his indigo robes, her small frame racked with the silent, cleansing sobs of a soul that had finally, after a lifetime of screaming, found a moment of peace. Naruto stood perfectly still, his hand hovering for a moment before coming to rest gently on her head. He had not broken her. He had not tamed her. He had simply shown her that her cage was an illusion, and that the door had been open all along. And in the profound, healing silence of the Edelgardian dawn, he felt the first notes of a new, complex, and fiercely loyal melody begin to play. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. A Dance of Dragons and Phoenixes. The message that arrived from Kirigakur was not a summons, but an invitation. It came not via a frantic messenger bird, but through a formal diplomatic channel Naruto had established, a secure Fuinjutsu-based communique. Hat was both untraceable and instantaneous. The script was elegant, the language impeccably formal, yet beneath the layers of polite diplomatic parlance, the request was as sharp and clear as a shard of ice. Mei Terumi, the fifth Mizukage, wished to express her nation's profound gratitude for his intervention in Kiraame and formally requested his presence in her village to discuss the captured drive. Aris and the broader implications of his organization. It was, as Lucy had succinctly put it while lounging upside down on a floating crystalline sofa, a thank you card with a subpoena tucked inside. Naruto stood before a holographic map of the land of water, his expression contemplative. Kirigakur was a viper's nest, a village struggling to shed a skin of blood and paranoia. Mei Terumi was known to be a progressive leader, a reformer fighting an uphill battle against the deeply entrenched factions who still clung to the brutal traditions of the Bloody Mist. This invitation was a calculated risk on her part. She was inviting a foreign power of unimaginable strength into the heart of her village, a move that would be seen as either a brilliant strategic alliance or a catastrophic sign of weakness by her enemies. She's testing you, Gwen observed, her arms crossed as she analyzed the political data scrolling on a secondary screen. She wants to see if the Phoenix is a stabilizing G-force or a wildfire that will burn her precarious peace to the ground. Can't we just send a nice fruit basket? Lucy quipped, righting herself with a fluid motion. This whole diplomacy thing sounds like a bunch of talking in circles until someone gets a knife in their back. A rough, gravelly voice cut in from the doorway. Then you make sure you're the one holding the damn knife. Chiyuya stood there, leaning against the doorframe. She was dressed in the simple, dark gray and black utilitarian garb of Edelgard's sentinels, a stark contrast to her previous ragged attire. The curse mark on her neck was gone, replaced by a complex, golden seal of Naruto's design that suppressed Orochimaru's residual influence and stabilized her chakra. The feral rage in her eyes had been replaced by a sullen, watchful intensity. A loyalty as fierce and unyielding as a guard dog's. Her time in the labyrinth had not made her soft, it had simply aimed her ferocity in a new direction. Naruto turned from the map, a faint, appreciative smile on his lips. Chiyuya is correct, in her own way. Diplomacy is a dance, but the floor is often slick with blood. We will accept the Mizukage's invitation. He looked at each of them in turn. Gwen, I will need you as my chief advisor. Your ability to analyze people and energy systems will be invaluable in navigating Kiri's political landscape. Lucy, you will be our shadow. I need your ears and eyes in places we cannot officially go. Find out who whispers in the shadows of the Mizukage's court. He then looked at Chiyuya. And you, Chiyuya, will be my personal guard. Your sensory abilities with sound are second to none. You will be my early warning system. No one will get within 10 feet of me without you hearing the whisper of their breath. But, he added, his voice firm, you will hold your tongue unless spoken to. We are there to build a bridge, not to burn it down with profanity. Chiyuya just grunted, a sound that was equal parts acceptance and annoyance. It was the best he was going to get, and he knew it. So, what's the game plan, boss? Lucy asked, her eyes gleaming with anticipation. Charm the pants off the pretty Mizukage. The plan, Naruto said, his golden eyes reflecting the light of the holographic map, is to listen. We will listen to her words, to the silence between them, and to the secrets the mist itself keeps. We are going to Kirigakure to see if we can find an ally. And if not, we will ensure they understand the folly of becoming an enemy. Their arrival in Kirigakure was a study in controlled spectacle. They did not appear at the main gate. Instead, a shimmering, golden portal, a perfect circle of silent, swirling energy, opened in the center of the Mizukage's private receiving courtyard. Naruto stepped through first, his presence a calm, unshakable anchor in the disorienting swirl of dimensional energy. He was dressed in formal, midnight blue robes, the golden phoenix crest on his back subtle yet unmistakable. He was followed by Gwen, her posture exuding an aura of serene, intellectual confidence, and Chiyuya, who stood slightly behind him, her hands tucked into her sleeves, her eyes narrowed as she scoffed. The surroundings with a predatory stillness. Lucy, they all knew, was already somewhere in the village, a ghost in the machine. The courtyard was beautiful and stark. Polished, gray stones were arranged in swirling patterns around a central pool of mist-shrouded water. The architecture was unlike anything in Konaha. Tall, cylindrical buildings rose into the perpetual fog, connected by a web of delicate, high-arched bridges. The air was thick with the scent of salt and damp stone, and the only sound was the constant, gentle dripping of water. Awaiting them were two figures. The first was a young man with spiky brown hair and a lazy eye, an eye patch covering the other. He leaned on a long, twin-bladed sword, his posture relaxed but his chakra coiled like a spring. This was Ao, a veteran of the old guard and one of the Mizukage's most trusted advisors. The second figure was Maid Terumi herself. She was even more striking than her official portraits suggested. Her long, auburn hair was styled in an intricate, beautiful pattern, and she was dressed in the elegant, high-collared blue robes of the Mizukage. Her green eyes were sharp, intelligent, and held a hint of a deep, abiding weariness. But as she looked at Naruto, there was also a flicker of profound, undisguised curiosity. She radiated an aura of immense power, a subtle heat that seemed to keep the ever-present mist at bay. Lord Naruto, May began, her voice a smooth, melodic alto that held an unmistakable note of authority. She inclined her head in a gesture of respect, a significant political statement in itself. On behalf of Kirigakure no Sato, I welcome you. I trust your journey was uneventful. Her eyes flickered for a fraction of a second to the still fading portal, a silent acknowledgement of his unconventional arrival. Mizukage dono, Naruto replied, returning the bow with perfect, formal grace. My journey was as peaceful as the destination you have cultivated. His compliment was a subtle probe, acknowledging her efforts as a reformer. This was the opening move in their dance. Your reputation precedes you, Lord Naruto, May continued, her smile polite but her eyes analytical. Though the tales are so dramatic, one finds it difficult to separate fact from the fiction whispered by the wind. The wind often exaggerates, Naruto said smoothly. I am merely a man who prefers order to chaos. I find that when one is capable of removing chaos, order often follows. His statement was simple, direct, and contained a veiled assertion of his power that was impossible to misconstrue. Ao shifted his weight, his one visible eye narrowing. He could feel the power radiating from Naruto, a vast, calm ocean that made the most powerful shinobi he had ever encountered feel like shallow ponds. But it was the redhead behind him that put him on edge. Her chakra was a chaotic, snarling thing, barely contained, and her killing intent, though suppressed, was a palpable poison in the air. Mei's smile did not falter. A noble philosophy, one that we in Kurigakure have been striving towards for some time. Please, allow me to offer you our hospitality. We have much to discuss. The formal meeting was held in the Mizukage's council chambers, a circular room at the top of the tallest spire, offering a panoramic, fog-shrouded view of the village. It was a verbal chess match of the highest order. Mei's council, a collection of stern-faced, older shinobi who were clearly remnants of the old regime, grilled Naruto with thinly veiled accusations. They questioned his motives, his authority, the nature of his power. Through it all, Naruto remained a picture of unshakable calm. He answered their questions with a disarming, simple honesty that left their complex political traps with nothing to spring on. Gwen sat beside him, silent. But her sharp, analytical gaze missed nothing. She noted which council members' chakra flared with anger at Naruto's assertions of sovereignty, which ones shifted their gaze to Ao for guidance. She was mapping the web of alliances and animosities in the room with frightening accuracy. You lead a hidden village of your own, Lord Naruto, one particularly hawkish elder said, his voice a gravelly rasp. Yet you have no official recognition, no treaties. By the laws of the 5 great nations, you are nothing more than a rogue state, and your leader, a missing nin of Konaha. Before Naruto could reply, Chiyuya took a half-step forward, a low, animalistic growl rumbling in her throat. Watch your damn mouth, you old fossil, before I. Chiyuya, Naruto said, his voice perfectly calm, yet carrying a weight that instantly silenced her. She froze, then reluctantly stepped back into place, her glare still hot enough to melt steel. Naruto turned his serene gaze upon the elder. A village is a community of people, bound by shared ideals and mutual protection. A nation is merely a line drawn in the sand. My people are safe. They are prosperous. They are free from the endless cycle of hatred that your great nations seem so fond of perpetuating. By what metric would you call us rogue? He leaned forward slightly, the golden light in his eyes intensifying. As for my status as a missing nin, you are mistaken. One cannot be missing from a place they were never truly a part of. The sheer, unadulterated confidence of his words left the council speechless. He was not asking for their recognition. He was informing them that he did not require it. Mei intervened before the tension could snap, her voice a smooth, calming balm. The accomplishments of Lord Naruto speak for themselves. He has done this nation a great service. It is Kurigakure's wish to form a pact of non-aggression and intelligence sharing with his domain. She looked directly at Naruto. As a sign of our goodwill, we would be honored if you and your entourage would attend a private dinner with me this evening. It was both an olive branch and another test. A formal meeting was one thing. A private dinner was a far more intimate and dangerous political arena. Naruto accepted with a graceful nod. The dance would continue. That evening, as they were being escorted through the misty, lantern-lit corridors of the Mizukage's residence, it happened. Chiyuya, who had been walking in grim silence, suddenly stopped. Her head snapped to the side, her eyes narrowed in concentration. Wait, she hissed, her voice a low whisper. What is it? Gwen asked, her hand instinctively glowing with a faint pink light. Sound, Chiyuya murmured. It's wrong. The dripping of the water from the eaves, the frequency is off. It's too rhythmic. It's not natural condensation. It's a timed release. She pointed a thumb towards the floor. And underneath us, in the waterways, 6 heartbeats, suppressed. But they're there. They're matching their breathing to the flow of the water. Naruto stopped, his expression calm, but his celestial senses flared, confirming Chiyuya's report. The air itself tasted of ozone and killing intent. At that exact moment, the seemingly solid paper walls on either side of the corridor dissolved. Not torn, but atomized by a high-pressure water jutsu. From the mist-filled gardens beyond, a dozen assassins clad in the old, dark blue uniform of Kiri's hunter nin burst forth, their movements silent and deadly. Simultaneously, 6 more erupted from the waterways beneath the floorboards, their blades glinting in the dim lantern light. They moved with a perfect, coordinated grace, a 3-dimensional wave of death designed to overwhelm and instantly assassinate their targets. But their targets were not the unprepared diplomats they had expected. The moment the walls dissolved, a translucent, pink barrier of pure mana flared into existence around Gwen, deflecting a volley of poison Sanban. Hexa shield, she yelled, the intricate, geometric pattern of the shield holding firm. Chiyuya was already in motion. She didn't draw a weapon. She brought her flute to her lips and played a single, piercing, discordant note. It was not a genjutsu. It was a shockwave of pure, weaponized sound. Demonic flute. Dissonant wave. The assassins closest to her screamed, clutching their heads as the sound scrambled their equilibrium and threatened to rupture their eardrums. The 6 assassins who had come from the water, the elite of the group, ignored the others and converged on the true target, Naruto. Their blades were coated in a special, chakra-disrupting poison, and their movements were a blur of deadly intent. Naruto did not move from his spot. He simply watched them come, his expression one of profound disappointment. As the 6 blades were about to converge on him, he raised one hand. Shinra Tensei, he said, the 2 words spoken with a quiet, almost bored, finality. It was not the world-shattering, destructive force that Pain had used. This was different. It was a controlled, omnidirectional push of pure, celestial force. There was no sound, no explosion. The 6 assassins were simply repelled. They were thrown backwards as if by a giant, invisible hand, their attack utterly broken, their bodies slamming into the far walls of the garden with bone-jarring force. The remaining assassins, seeing their elite comrades neutralized in an instant, hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was all the time Naruto needed. He vanished. He moved between them like a phantom. A whisper of indigo in the mist. There were no flashy jutsus, no wasted movements. A single, precise strike to a pressure point on the neck. A gentle palm strike to the chest that disrupted the flow of chakra. He was not a warrior. He was a surgeon, disabling them with a calm, terrifying efficiency. In less than 10 seconds, the battle was over. 20 assassins lay on the ground, either unconscious or writhing in agony, their equilibrium shattered by Tayuya's sonic assault. The 3 of them stood in the center of the ruined corridor, completely untouched. Mei and Ao arrived a moment later, their own elite guards in tow. They skidded to a halt, taking in the scene of absolute, one-sided devastation. Mei's face was a pale, cold mask of fury. Ao's single eye was wide with disbelief. My sincerest apologies, Lord Naruto, Mei said, her voice trembling with barely suppressed rage. This is an unforgivable breach of hospitality. An act of treason. Naruto simply looked at the unconscious assassins. Then back at her. His golden eyes were not angry. They were filled with a calm, analytical light. You have a rot in your house, Mizukage Dono, he said, his voice level. Factions that cling to the old ways. They see your attempts at peace as a weakness. They see me as a threat to their power. He knelt beside one of the unconscious assassins, his fingers glowing with a soft, golden light. He placed them on the man's forehead. He was not reading his mind in the traditional, invasive way. He was reading the echoes of his intent, the resonance of his allegiance. After a moment, he stood up. The clan of the Blood Moon, he said simply. An old, powerful family of weapons masters who profited greatly from the constant warfare of the Bloody Mist era. Your reforms have cost them their wealth and influence. They would rather see Kirigakure burn than see it change. He looked directly into Mei's eyes. This was not just an attack on me. This was an attack on you. A coup d'état in the making. Mei's expression hardened. She had suspected as much, but to have it confirmed so starkly by an outsider, it was a profound humiliation. What will you do? She asked, her voice quiet. This was the true test. A warlord would demand retribution, would use this insult as a pretext for war. Naruto's answer surprised her. Nothing, he said. He turned and began to walk towards the still intact dining hall. This is an internal matter for Kirigakure. How you choose to prune the diseased branches from your tree is your decision as Cage. He paused at the door, looking back at her over his shoulder. But I will say this. A tree that is not pruned will eventually be consumed by its own rot. And a forest that allows such a rot to fester will eventually find itself facing a purifying fire. He then entered the dining hall, Gwen and Tayuya following him, leaving Mei and Ao standing in the wreckage, surrounded by the evidence of their village's deep-seated sickness. Mei looked at the calm, confident back of the man who had just effortlessly dismantled her village's most elite assassins and had then handed the power to deal with the traitors back to her. He wasn't a warlord. He wasn't a conqueror. He was a mirror, reflecting her own strengths and weaknesses back at her. And in that moment, her political curiosity and strategic assessment of him began to transmute into something far more personal, a deep, profound, and unsettling admiration. The private dinner was a tense but far more honest affair. The pleasantries were gone, replaced by a blunt, direct conversation between two leaders. They spoke of the shadowy organization behind Drive, Aris, of the instability of the 5 great nations, of the coming darkness they both felt on the horizon. Naruto spoke of his philosophy of true peace, one built not on a balance of power, but on mutual understanding and the strength to defend the innocent. Mei listened, and for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of something she had thought long dead, hope. She was not alone in her struggle. Here, across the table from her, was a power unlike any the world had ever seen, and it was guided not by ambition or greed, but by a clear, unshakable moral compass. As the night drew to a close, she looked at him, the soft lantern light playing on the strong, calm features of his face. "You are a dangerous man, Naruto Uzumaki," she said, her voice a soft, intimate murmur. "Only to those who embrace chaos," he replied, his golden eyes meeting hers. "And to those who have grown weary of fighting alone," she countered, her green eyes holding a new, deeper light. "You are something else entirely." Their dance was not over. It had just begun, and they both knew, with a certainty that transcended politics and treaties, that their steps were now destined to be intertwined. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Celestial Trials. The peace that followed their return from Kirigakure was a profound and deceptive thing. On the surface, Edelgird hummed with its usual serene energy. Gwen delved deeper into the fusion of mana and fuinjutsu, creating hybrid seals that shimmered with an otherworldly pink and gold light. Lucy, with a newfound sense of purpose, began training the city's sentinel force, her fluid, unpredictable combat style forcing the disciplined ex-shinobi to abandon their rigid tush and learn the art of true adaptation. Tayuya, in the quiet solitude of the Sanctuary of the Lost, began to compose music again. The melodies were no longer the snarling, dissonant anthems of her rage, but complex, melancholic pieces that spoke of pain, loss, and the fragile, terrifying beauty of a single, quiet note of hope. But beneath the surface of this piece, Naruto was changing. The confrontation with Satsuki, the political dance with Mei, the redemption of Tayuya, each event had been a stone dropped into the placid ocean of his soul, and the ripples were expanding, altering the very currents of his being. He found himself watching the women around him with a new, introspective clarity, seeing not just his allies, but the living embodiments of the virtues he most admired. Gwen's wisdom, Lucy's adaptability, Tayuya's resilience, Hinata's distant but palpable empathy, Mei's strength of leadership, even Satsuki's terrible, unyielding focus. He was beginning to see them not as separate individuals orbiting his world, but as integral parts of his own spiritual cosmology. He was meditating at the dimension's core, a place where the laws of physics bent into a gentle, stable singularity of pure, creative energy. He floated in the center of a sphere of swirling starlight, his body cross-legged, his mind adrift in the vast, silent ocean of celestial power. It was here, in the absolute heart of his creation, that the voice of the phoenix spoke, its tone not of guidance, but of immanence. The vessel is strong, the chorus of ethereal chimes resonated within his soul. The spirit has been tempered. The heart has been opened. But the union is incomplete. A bridge must be built between the mortal consciousness and the divine infinite. "What must I do?" Naruto asked the silence, his own voice a distant echo. "You have forged your power in the crucible of the external world. Now, you must forge your soul in the crucible of the internal. You have understood your strength. Now, you must understand its source. The celestial trials await, my child. They are not tests to be passed, but truths to be accepted. Do you consent to the journey?" There was no hesitation. The path to true understanding. no matter how perilous, was the only one he had ever cared to walk. I do. Then let the journey begin. And may you not be lost in your own reflection. The sphere of starlight around him did not shatter, it flowed inward. Converging on his position, reality dissolved. There was no sensation of movement, only a profound and total becoming. He was no longer a body floating in space, but a point of pure consciousness. A single, solitary, I, in a sea of unformed potential. And then, the first trial began. The first trial. The weeping garden of glass. He stood in a world of profound, silent sorrow. The sky was a permanent twilight, the color of a day-old bruise. The ground was not earth, but a field of soft, white sand that muffled all sound. And from this sand grew a forest of crystalline trees. Their branches like frozen tears, their leaves delicate, razor-thin shards of glass. A gentle, sorrowful wind blew through the branches, creating a sound like a million tiny, heartbroken chimes. In the center of the garden stood a well, and from it flowed not water, but a river of liquid silver that was the source of all the sorrow in this land. He knew, with an instinct that transcended logic, that his task was to cross the garden and reach the well. But as he took his first step, the glass leaves of the trees trembled, and the sorrowful chiming intensified. From the silver river, figures began to rise. They were made of weeping, formless glass, their faces shifting, indistinct masks of pain. They were the lonely, the forgotten, the ostracized, the ghostly echoes of every villager who had ever shunned him. Every child who had ever pointed a finger in hatred. They did not attack him. They simply reached out, their glassy fingers trailing whispers of his own past against his skin. Demon, monster, alone, unwanted. He instinctively flared his chakra, a golden aura of celestial fire erupting around him. The light was righteous and pure, and the glass figures recoiled, hissing. Their forms beginning to crack and melt under its intensity. He could destroy them. He could obliterate this entire garden of sorrow with a single, purifying burst of his power. It would be easy. It would be just. But as he prepared to unleash his fire, a new figure materialized beside him, walking out from behind one of the crystalline trees. It was an echo of Hinata Hyuga. She was not the shy, stammering girl he knew. This echo was an archetype of pure empathy, her pearlescent eyes holding the sorrow of the entire world, her bearing serene and impossibly gentle. She was barefoot, and her feet made no sound on the sand. Why do you raise your fire against a shadow, Naruto-sama? Her voice whispered, not in his ears, but in the part of his heart that still remembered what it was to be small and afraid. They are not your enemies. They are your pain. To burn them is to burn a part of yourself. They are the echoes of a hatred I have long since surpassed, Naruto stated, his voice hard. Have you? The Hinata echo asked softly. She gestured to the cowering glass figures. You have built a wall of power to keep them out. But a wall, no matter how strong, is still a cage. True transcendence is not to ignore the wound, but to understand its scar. She walked forward, towards the most monstrous of the glass figures, a hulking brute whose face was a swirling vortex of malice. The figure raised a jagged, crystalline claw to strike her down. Naruto prepared to intervene, to vaporize it, but Hinata's echo simply raised a hand. She did not create a shield. She did not prepare an attack. She simply reached out and gently, tenderly, touched the monster's face. The moment her fingers made contact, the monster froze. Its snarling visage softened. A single, perfect crack appeared on its surface. And from that crack, the liquid silver sorrow of the river began to leak, like a tear. The Hinata echo did not pull away. She simply stood there, her own eyes filling with a shared, silent grief. Accepting its pain without judgment. The monster did not shatter. It dissolved, its form turning back into the silver sorrow and flowing back into the river, leaving the world a little less pain than it was before. The truth of the trial struck Naruto with the force of a physical blow. This was not a test of his power to destroy his past. It was a test of his power to accept it. He let his golden aura recede, leaving himself vulnerable, open. He walked towards the crowd of glass figures. They swarmed him, their cold, cutting whispers washing over him. Monster. Alone. Demon. He did not raise a shield. He did not fight back. He simply closed his eyes and listened. He let the pain of his own history wash over him, not as an attack, but as a memory. And he found, to his surprise, that the sting was no longer there. He had not surpassed the hatred, he had outgrown it. He reached out his own hand and touched the nearest figure. He poured not his power, but his understanding into it. He let it feel the peace of Edelgird, the warmth of his camaraderie with Gwen and Lucy, the fierce loyalty of Tayuya. He showed it that its hatred had not created a monster, but had forged a protector. One by one, the glass figures reached out and touched him. And one by one, they dissolved, their sorrow flowing back to its source, their painful chiming fading into a gentle, peaceful silence. He walked the path through the now still garden, and when he reached the well of sorrow, he did not destroy it. He simply placed his hand upon its rim, and in a final act of acceptance, he allowed it to be. The sorrow was a part of his story, and he was no longer afraid of it. The weeping garden of glass faded to white. The second trial. The shifting labyrinth of whimsy. The world reformed into a place of glorious, impossible chaos. He was standing on a floating, checkerboard platform in a sky the color of lemon sherbet. Around him were structures that defied all logic, staircases that led nowhere, rivers that flowed uphill into clouds made of cotton candy, forests of clocks where time ran backwards. Nothing was stable. The ground beneath his feet would suddenly turn to jelly, then to solid steel. Then to a flock of startled birds that would fly away, leaving him to fall until the air itself decided to become as solid as the ground. This was a test of adaptability, and it was maddening. Every jutsu he tried to use failed, its fundamental principles rendered meaningless in a world where physics was a suggestion, not a law. His immense speed was useless when the space bet. Wing 2 points could stretch to infinity in a heartbeat. His celestial shields were pointless when an attack could simply decide to phase through them. A giggle echoed through the chaotic space, and a figure swung down from a chandelier made of laughing gas, landing perfectly beside him. It was an echo of Lucy Mann, but amplified, a pure archetype of whimsy and chaos. Her purple hair was a riot of impossible shapes, and her eyes sparkled with a cosmic mischief. Having trouble, Goldilocks, she chirped, her form flickering from a young girl to an old woman to a purple squirrel and back again in the span of a second. You're trying to play chess in the middle of a food fight. Stop thinking so hard. The rules are, there are no rules. There are always rules, Naruto countered, narrowly avoiding a cascade of falling pianos by turning the spot he was standing on into a trampoline with a sheer act of will. The key is to understand them. Boring. The Lucy echo sang, as she tap danced on a sunbeam. Understanding is for things that hold still. Nothing holds still here. Not me. Not you. Not the ground. So what do you do when you can't stand? You dance. She leapt off the sunbeam, her body turning into a ribbon of purple light that flowed and weaved through the chaotic landscape with a joyful, effortless grace. She didn't fight the chaos. She became a part of it. She didn't try to predict where the next platform would appear. She simply trusted that one would be there when her foot came down. The lesson was as simple and as profound as the last. He was trying to impose order on a system that thrived on its absence. His power was based on control, on the mastery of fundamental principles. But there was another kind of power. The power of surrender, of flowing with the current. Instead of trying to command the river, he stopped trying to use his techniques. He stopped trying to analyze the shifting world around him. He just let go. He took a step off the platform into the sherbet-colored sky. And instead of falling, he floated. He pushed off a current of air that tasted of cinnamon, his body no longer a rigid form, but a fluid concept. He laughed, a sound of pure, unburdened liberation, as he danced with Lucis echo through the impossible, beautiful chaos. He was not the master of this place. He was its partner. He was a part of its mad, wonderful song. And when the world finally faded, the echo of his own laughter was the last thing to disappear. The third trial. The observatory of the final question. He stood in a place of infinite, silent majesty. It was a vast, circular chamber. Its floor a perfect, black mirror that reflected the cosmos above. But the ceiling was not a ceiling, it was an open window to the entirety of creation. Nebulae, galaxies, quasars, and the birth and death of stars played out in a silent, breathtaking ballet of cosmic light. In the center of the chamber was a single, intricate orrery, its crystalline planets and silver arms rotating in perfect, silent harmony. This was the trial of wisdom. Standing beside the orrery, her form seemingly woven from the starlight itself, was the echo of Gwen Tennyson. This version of her was not the eager, sometimes flustered student of magic he knew. This was an archetype of pure, serene intellect, her green eyes holding the calm, patient light of a billion ancient suns. "Welcome, seeker," her voice resonated, not as sound, but as a wave of pure comprehension that washed through his mind. Every wielder of great power must, in the end, face the final question. Before you can truly master the fire of creation, you must understand its nature. "What is the question?" Naruto asked. The Gwen echo gestured to the cosmic ballet above them. "Behold the universe. It is a symphony of perfect, immutable laws. Gravity, electromagnetism, the flow of time, all things are bound by these rules. All things, but you." She turned her starlit gaze upon him. "The fire you wield is the fire that existed before the laws were written. It is the power of creation itself. With it, you can mend the broken, heal the sick, create life from nothing." Her form shimmered, and the cosmic scene above them changed. It showed Edelgird, perfect and peaceful. It showed the lives he had saved in Kiraame. It showed Yuya, her face softened by the light of her newfound hope. "But," the Gwen echo continued, her tone becoming grave, "the power to create is also the power to unmake. With a single thought, you could erase a star from existence. With a flicker of will, you could unravel the very laws that hold this universe together. You could silence the symphony and replace it with a perfect, orderly, and eternal silence of your own making." The scene above shifted again, showing a universe of absolute blackness. A void where nothing existed, a perfect, peaceful, and utterly dead reality he could create. "And so, we arrive at the final question, Naruto Uzumaki," she said, her voice now seamy. "Ing to come from every star in the heavens. Why should you not? Why should a being of your power be bound by the rules of a lesser, imperfect existence? Why should you serve a chaotic, painful, flawed reality, when you have the power to replace it with a perfect one? What is the ultimate purpose of your power?" The question was a trap. A beautiful, logical, seductive trap. Any answer he could give would be born of his limited, mortal perspective. To preserve life, life was flawed. To create peace, his peace would be an imposed, artificial thing. He looked at the orrery, at the perfect, silent dance of its crystalline planets. He looked at the silent, majestic dance of the galaxies above. And he understood. "The purpose of my power is to have no purpose," he said, the answer coming to him not as a thought, but as a fundamental truth. The Gwen echo's serene expression flickered with the barest hint of a smile. "Explain. A tool has a purpose. A hammer is for building. A sword is for cutting. To define my power with a purpose is to reduce it to a tool, to bind it," he explained, his own voice resonating with a newfound clarity. "My power is not a tool to be used on the universe. It is a part of the universe. It is like gravity. It is like light. It does not exist to do something. It simply is. Its purpose is to exist, to be a part of the symphony, not to be its conductor. I am not here to command the dance. I am only here to dance with it." The Gwen echo smiled, a radiant, beautiful expression that seemed to make the very stars shine brighter. "You have answered wisely. You have understood that true power is not the ability to command, but the wisdom to serve." The observatory of stars dissolved, its final, silent lesson imprinted upon the very fabric of his soul. The final trial. The throne of the setting sun. The final trial was a convergence of all the others. He stood on a desolate, black glass plain under a sky dominated by two celestial bodies, a blindingly white moon, representing the silent perfection he could create, and a dying, blood-red sun, representing the flawed, chaotic, beautiful world as it was. In the space between them, two thrones sat back to back. On the throne facing the white moon sat a perfect, angelic version of himself, robed in pure white, his eyes a calm, empty gold. This was the God King, the being he could become if he chose the path of absolute, imposed order. On the throne facing the dying sun sat his ultimate shadow, the echo of Satsuki Uchiha. She was not the conflicted girl he had faced in the ruins of Konaha. This was an archetype of his own potential for loss and vengeance, a goddess of beautiful, terrible wrath. Her Sharingan had evolved into a pattern of impossible complexity, and she was wreathed in an aura of black, celestial lightning. She was everything he could have become if the Phoenix's fire had been fueled by his hatred instead of his hope. So, you have arrived at the final choice, the Satsuki echo said, her voice a melody of cold, beautiful fury. His path, she gestured to the white-robed God King, is the path of the cage. A perfect, silent prison of your own making. She then gestured to the dying sun. My path is the path of the fire. To burn away the imperfections, the pain, the betrayals. To cleanse this broken world in a final, glorious blaze of righteous vengeance. There is another path, Naruto stated. His own voice the calm center between their two extremes. There is no other path. She snarled, rising from her throne, her power making the very ground tremble. You must choose. Will you be their jailer? Or their executioner? The silent god, or the avenging demon? There is no place for a protector in a world that deserves only oblivion. She lunged at him, her hand a blade of black lightning, a perfect, god-like Chidori that could extinguish suns. He did not raise a shield. He did not prepare a Rasengan. He simply stood his ground, and as her attack was about to strike him, he opened his soul completely. He let her feel everything he had learned in the trials. He let her feel the accepted sorrow of the weeping garden. He let her feel the joyful surrender of the shifting labyrinth. He let her feel the profound, purposeless purpose he had found in the observatory of stars. He did not fight her darkness with his light. He showed her that his light contained its own darkness, and that her darkness was just a different shade of light. He showed her that they were not opposites. They were a balance. Her attack stopped, the tip of her lightning-wreathed fingers a mere inch from his heart. Her Sharingan wavered, the fury in her eyes replaced by a profound, soul-shattering confusion. She was the echo of his own shadow, and he had just shown her the sun. He reached out and gently touched her cheek, just as he had in the Uchiha compound. I will not be their jailer. And I will not be their executioner, he said, his voice soft but absolute. I will be their gardener. I will prune the diseased branches, and I will nurture the fragile blossoms. I will not burn the world for its imperfections. I will protect it for its potential to be beautiful. He turned from her and walked past the two thrones, towards the horizon where the dying sun and the perfect moon met. He did not choose one over the other. He chose the path between them. The path of balance. The Satsuki echo watched him go. A single, black tear tracing a path down her porcelain cheek. The God King on his throne simply faded into nothingness, an irrelevant, discarded possibility. Naruto walked into the twilight horizon. And as he did, the dying red sun and the cold white moon began to move towards each other, not to collide, but to merge, to become a single, perfect eclipse of golden light. Naruto awoke. He was back in the core of Edelgird, floating in the sphere of starlight. But something was different. The power of the Phoenix was no longer a separate, divine entity coiling within his soul. It was him. The distinction between the mortal and the divine had been erased. His chakra and the celestial fire were one and the same. He could feel the life force of every citizen in his city, the hum of every seal. The slow, patient growth of every tree, not as an observer, but as a part of himself. He opened his eyes. The cerulean blue was still there, but the golden fire no longer swirled within it. The two colors had merged, creating an iris of impossible, liquid gold that seemed to hold the light of 1,000 peaceful dawns. He had not just gained power. He had achieved clarity. He understood, with a certainty that was as fundamental as his own existence, the nature of his bond with each of the women whose echoes had guided him. He saw them not as potential romantic interests in a line, but as unique, essential notes in the symphony of his own soul. His connection to each of them was different, irreplaceable, and profound. He knew that the world outside his sanctuary was still broken. That darkness was still gathering on the horizon. But for the first time, he did not feel the weight of it as a burden. He felt it as a purpose, a reason to exist. He was not a lonely god. He was a part of the world. And he was not alone. The trials were over. The real work was about to begin. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Gathering Storm. The training chamber was silent. But the air itself was a screaming vortex of power. A miniature hurricane of razor-sharp wind blades, each one infused with the corrosive properties of a high-level acid spell, converged from all Sid. on the motionless figure of Naruto Uzumaki. It was Gwen's latest creation, a terrifying fusion of ninjutsu principles and pure mana manipulation, a jutsu that could theoretically flay an entire platoon down to bare skeletons in seconds. Simultaneously, the very floor beneath Naruto liquefied, becoming a churning, grasping sea of purple ooze as Lucy, in her full open form, attempted to drag him down into a suffocating protoplasmic prison. It was a perfectly coordinated attack, a multi-axis assault designed to overwhelm, disorient, and annihilate. And it did absolutely nothing. Naruto didn't erect a shield. He didn't dodge. He didn't even brace himself. He simply stood in the eye of the storm, his new, liquid gold eyes half-lidded in a state of serene contemplation. As Gwen's acid wind vortex was about to make contact, he raised a single finger. He did not project power. He did not negate the attack. He simply touched it. A single, soft, harmonic chime, a note of pure, celestial resonance, echoed from the point of contact. The effect was instantaneous and utterly baffling. The screaming, corrosive wind did not dissipate, it was transformed. The chaotic, destructive energies were smoothed out. Their violent song calmed and retuned. The acid became harmless water vapor. The razor-sharp wind became a gentle, swirling breeze that smelled faintly of cherry blossoms. The entire, terrifying jutsu was not broken. It was pacified. Beneath him, loosest grasping tendrils of goo touched his ankles, and the same phenomenon occurred. The aggressive, suffocating biomass did not recoil. It simply lost its hostile intent. Her control over the form wasn't severed. It was as if her own body suddenly decided it would rather give him a gentle foot massage than try to devour him. The gentle breeze subsided. The purple goo settled back into a placid, shimmering puddle on the floor. Gwen stood with her hands outstretched, her mouth slightly agape, the pink glow of her mana fading in her confusion. Lucy reformed into her human guise, looking down at her own hands as if they had betrayed her. "Okay," Lucy said, breaking the stunned silence. "I officially have no idea what just happened. It's like my own body just told me to chill out." That was weirdly relaxing and incredibly frustrating at the same time. Gwen's eyes were wide with a look of scientific awe that bordered on religious reverence. "It's your energy, Naruto," she breathed, taking a step forward. "It's changed. Before, I could feel the fusion of your chakra and the phoenix force. It was like two powerful rivers merging. Now, there's only one river. There's no distinction. The energy isn't in you anymore. It is you. When your finger touched my spell, you didn't counter it. You taught it a new song." Naruto opened his eyes fully, the liquid gold within them seeming to radiate a gentle, palpable warmth that filled the entire chamber. He smiled, a calm, knowing expression that was leagues away from the brash grins of his youth. "The trials were illuminating," he said, his voice imbued with a new, quiet resonance. "I no longer see the world as a collection of separate energies, chakra, mana, life force. I see it all as a single, universal composition. Each person, each jutsu, each soul has its own unique melody. Before, I could only overwhelm the songs I didn't like with my own. Now," he paused, looking at them with a profound sense of connection, "I can finally hear the harmony." He looked at Gwen, and for a moment, she felt as if he wasn't just looking at her, but at the very structure of her soul, at the intricate, beautiful melody of her intellect and her compassion. He then turned his gaze to Lucy, and she felt a sudden, dizzying sense of being completely and utterly seen. Her chaotic, whimsical, and fiercely loyal heart understood in a way it had never been before. It was an intimacy that transcended the physical, and it was breathtaking. Before either of them could formulate a response to this new, profound state of being, the priority alert from Kirigakur chimed through the chamber. The tone was clipped, urgent, and laced with a controlled panic that immediately shattered the serene atmosphere. A holographic screen materialized before them, showing the grim, eye-patch-covered face of Ao. His usual stoic demeanor was gone, replaced by a raw, shaken horror. "Lord Naruto," he began, his voice strained. It's the Black Reef Garrison. Fort Kiraame. It's gone. Gone," Gwen repeated, stepping closer to the screen. "What do you mean, gone? Was it destroyed?" "Worse," Ao bit out, a tremor in his voice. "It was erased. Wiped clean. The entire fortress, the 200 shinobi stationed there is nothing left. No rubble, no bodies, no chakra residue, just a perfectly smooth, circular crater of fused, glassy rock, a kilometer in diameter. The only thing our sensors could detect was a faint, lingering energy signature of a type we have never encountered before. It feels like it's actively jamming the natural energy of the area. He transmitted a file. A single, ominous word appeared on the screen, translated from the encrypted data they had extracted from Dr. Arisa's mind. Genesis. Naruto's golden eyes hardened, the serene warmth within them cooling into the focused intensity of a distant star. He remembered the cold, clinical voice of the organization's leader, the one who had taken credit for the human trafficking ring. This was not a random act of violence. This was a statement. They're accelerating their plans, Naruto stated, his voice a low, dangerous calm. This was a test of their new weaponry, and a message to the world's leaders. What's the message? Lucy asked, her expression grim. That the old ways are obsolete, Naruto answered. That the power of the shinobi nations is a flickering candle against the storm they intend to unleash. They are attempting to sow fear and discord, to make the cages retreat into their traditional shells of isolationism and paranoia, leaving them free to be picked off one by one. They will succeed, Gwen added, her mind rapidly processing the geopolitical implications. The current political climate is too fractured. The 5 great nations would sooner tear each other apart than unite against a common, unknown enemy. Then we will force them to unite, Naruto declared, his voice leaving no room for argument. He turned away from the screen, a new, decisive fire in his eyes. He was no longer content to merely react to the world's chaos. The time for quiet protection from the shadows was over. It was time for the Phoenix to reveal itself to the world. The cages are blind and deaf to the true threats. I will make them see. I will make them listen. He strode over to the master communication console, his hands flying across the holographic controls. He was not sending requests. He was sending summons. Golden, phoenix-crested invitations materialized in the offices of the Hokage, the Raikage, the Tsuchikage, and the Kazekage. The message was simple, direct, and utterly audacious. A threat that transcends our borders has revealed itself. The age of shinobi as we know it is at an end. A summit of the 5 Kage is to be convened on the neutral ground of the Land of Iron in 3 days' time. Your presence is not requested. It is required. Come, or be left to face the coming storm alone. It was a declaration of intent, a gauntlet thrown down at the feet of the most powerful leaders in the world. He was no longer a rogue element. He was positioning himself as the folk rum upon which the future of their world would turn. The Land of Iron, Lucy said with a low whistle. Bold, calling a meeting on someone else's turf. It is the only place they will all agree to meet, Naruto said, turning back to them. And its master, General Mifune, is a man who values honor and true strength above politics. He will understand. He looked at his companions, his true inner circle. Gwen, Lucy, Chiyuya. Pack for a cold climate. We are about to step onto the world stage. And we will not be asking for our place on it. We will be taking it. The Land of Iron was a world of sharp, monochromatic beauty. Towering, snow-dusted mountains clawed at a steel-gray sky. The air was thin, cold, and so clean it felt sharp in the lungs. The architecture was stark and elegant, pagodas of dark wood and gray stone standing in silent defiance of the biting wind. It was a land of samurai, of men and women bound by a code of honor so rigid it was its own form of power. They were greeted not by a committee, but by a single man, General Mifune. He was old, his face a roadmap of 1,000 battles, but his eyes were as clear and sharp as the blade he carried at his side. He stood alone in the center of a vast, snow-covered courtyard, his presence as solid and unshakable as the mountains themselves. He watched as Naruto's golden portal opened, a silent, swirling tear in his stark reality. He did not flinch. He simply observed as Naruto and his entourage stepped through. He looked at Gwen's intelligent eyes, Lucy's coiled energy, Chiyuya's barely leashed ferocity. Then his gaze settled on Naruto. He saw not a shinobi, not a Jinchuriki, but a true leader of men, a being whose power was not worn like armor, but radiated from his very soul like the heat from a forge. Uzumaki Naruto, Mifune said. His voice a gravelly baritone. He did not bow, but gave a slight, respectful nod. Your message was compelling. You bring a storm to my quiet land. I bring the warning before the storm, Naruto corrected, returning the nod with equal respect. Thank you for hosting this, General. I know it puts you in a difficult political position. Honor is not a political position, Mifune stated simply. It is a state of being. A great threat requires a great response. It is my honor to provide the ground upon which that response will be forged. His eyes held a deep, ancient wisdom. But be warned. The cages are proud, stubborn creatures. They will not be easily led. I do not intend to lead them, Naruto replied, his golden eyes meeting the old samurai's without wavering. I intend to aim them. One by one, the cages arrived. The fourth Raikage, and his entourage arrived in a literal flash of lightning, his massive, muscular form radiating impatience and aggression. The third Tsuchikage, Onoki, floated down from the sky, a tiny, ancient man whose frail appearance belied the immense power that churned within him. Gaara of the Sand, the fifth Kazekage, appeared in a quiet swirl of sand. His youthful face calm and impassive, but his turquoise eyes holding a wisdom far beyond his years. Tsunade of the Leaf arrived last, her expression grim and weary. The tension in the air was thick enough to taste. The ancient rivalries, the deep-seated mistrust, all of it bubbled just beneath the surface of their strained, formal greetings. They were powerful leaders, but they were prisoners of their own history. They were gathered in the main summit hall, a cavernous room with a single, massive, circular table. The atmosphere was colder than the biting wind outside. Onak. I was already complaining about his back. I was drumming his fingers on the table, a thunderous, impatient rhythm. Naruto stood at the head of the table, flanked by Gwen and Tayuya, ready to begin. And it was at that moment that the great, iron-bound doors of the hall slid open with a deafening groan. Every head turned, every cage tensed, their hands moving towards the weapons or jutsu that were never far from their command. Framed in the doorway, silhouetted against the gray light of the snowy courtyard, stood a solitary figure. She was dressed in a simple, dark traveling cloak, but there was no mistaking the proud, aristocratic bearing, the river of midnight hair, or the crest of the Uchiha fan emblazoned on her back. Satsuki Uchiha stepped into the hall, her movements silent and fluid. Her red Sharingan eyes, cold and sharp as a winter's night, swept across the room, ignoring the shocked and hostile glares of the cages. Her gaze landed on Naruto, and for a fraction of a second, an unreadable, complex emotion flickered in their depths. What is the meaning of this? The Raikage roared, slamming his fist on the table. An international criminal, a member of the Akatsuki. Seize her. Several samurai and shinobi moved to obey, but stopped as Satsuki raised a hand. She was not looking at them. She was looking at Naruto. In her hand, she held a piece of twisted, metallic plating. A fragment of armor that hummed with the same unnatural energy Ao had described. I am not here for you, she said, her voice a low, cold melody. I have been hunting a shadow organization, a group that deals in forbidden technology and human experimentation. They are the ones who truly orchestrated my clan's downfall. My hunt for their foot soldiers led me to the land of water. My hunt for their masters led me here. She tossed the piece of armor onto the center of the table. It skidded to a stop, the unnatural energy it radiated causing the air around it to shimmer. The evidence was irrefutable. Her personal quest for vengeance and Naruto's global crisis had converged. They were hunting the same monster. Naruto gave a slight nod, accepting her unexpected arrival as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Genesis, he said, giving the enemy a name. He then began to speak. He laid out everything. The operation in Kiraame, the captured drive. Aris, the erased fortress, Satsuki's evidence. He spoke not with the passion of a politician, but with the calm, irrefutable certainty of a natural law. He was not presenting a theory. He was describing the shape of the world to a grow P of men and women who had been staring at a faulty map. The cages listened, their skepticism warring with the undeniable weight of the evidence. Even if this is true, Onoki said, his old voice cracking with suspicion. This is a matter for the 5 great nations to handle. Why should we trust you, a rogue, to lead this charge? Because your nations are slow, decadent, and bound by a history of hatred you are too proud to escape. Naruto replied, his voice still calm, but now laced with an edge of cold, hard truth. You would spend a year debating treaties and arguing over command structures. While Genesis burns our world to the ground, I am not bound by your traditions. I am not hindered by your pride. Arrogant child, I roared, rising to his feet, his body crackling with lightning. You dare speak to us of power? It was then that the attack came. It did not come with an explosion or a shout. It came with a low, unnatural hum that vibrated in the bones. The very air grew thick, heavy, as if the laws of physics were being rewritten. A shimmering, crimson energy barrier slammed into existence, encasing the entire summit hall, its light casting ghastly red shadows on the faces of the cages. Simultaneously, the natural chakra in the air was jammed. It became sluggish, difficult to mold, like trying to breathe in a vacuum. What is this? Tsunade yelled, her own attempt at a jutsu sputtering in her hands. Then, from the solid iron walls of the chamber, they emerged. 10 figures, clad in sleek, seamless white armor that seemed to absorb the light. They didn't use doors. They simply phased through the solid matter, their movements silent and utterly inhuman. Their faces were obscured by blank, white helmets, and they carried rifles that hummed with the same crimson energy as the barrier. A cold, synthetic voice, devoid of all emotion, echoed through the hall, seeming to come from everywhere at once. It was the voice of the hologram from Kiraame, the leader of Genesis. Esteemed cages, apologies for the interruption. We have monitored your progress and found it wanting. Your species is plagued by inefficiency, by emotion, by the chaos of free will. It is a sickness. We are the cure. Consider this a demonstration of your obsolescence. The age of shinobi is over. The age of Genesis has begun. The white-armored soldiers raised their rifles. The cages, for all their power, were caught completely off guard. Their most powerful jutsu were suppressed, their movements sluggish in the energy-dampening field. The Raikage's lightning armor flickered and died. Onoki's dust release wouldn't even form. But Naruto's team was not a conventional shinobi squad. The first rifle blast, a beam of pure, disruptive energy, was not aimed at a cage. It was aimed at Naruto. But it never reached him. A hexagonal shield of vibrant, shimmering pink mana flared into existence before him, Gwen's hand outstretched. The energy beam splashed against it, the technology of Genesis meeting the pure magic of another universe. My mana isn't chakra, Gwen grunted, the shield holding firm. It plays by different rules. 2 of the soldiers phased behind Tayuya to execute her. Before they could solidify, she slammed the butt of her flute onto the ground, releasing a burst of focused, omnidirectional sound. The sonic pulse didn't affect the cages, but it savaged the sensitive phasing mechanisms of the soldiers. The 2 men screamed inside their helmets as their bodies were violently ripped back into a solid state, their armor sparking and malfunctioning. Lucy, with a feral grin, dissolved into a purple blur. The dampening field affected chakra, not her unique biology. She was a chaotic element they had not accounted for, a wave of protoplasm that engulfed one soldier. Her body seeping into the joints of his armor and hardening, crushing him from the inside. Satsuki's Sharingan spun, its tomo shifting into her Mangekyu pattern. The tech might have dampened chakra, but it could not fool her eyes. She could see the minute fluctuations in reality that preceded the soldiers, phasing, allowing her to strike with her lightning-coated blade not where they were, but where they were going to be. But the true anchor in the storm was Naruto. He stood in the center of the chaos, his golden eyes glowing with a serene, immense power. The chakra-dampening field washed over him, and it was like a gentle rain trying to extinguish a star. His power was not just chakra. It was celestial. It was fundamental. It was the energy that existed before the rules the field was trying to enforce. One of the Genesis soldiers fired a beam directly at his face. Naruto didn't move. He simply looked at it. The beam of crimson energy, a force that could atomize solid steel, slowed, its color wavering. And then it simply unraveled. It broke apart into harmless photons, like a frayed rope. Your technology is impressive, Naruto said, his voice resonating with a calm, cosmic power that cut through the hum of the Genesis field. It sings a song of control, of order, of silence. He raised a hand, his palm glowing with a gentle, golden light. But my song is older. He slammed his open palm onto the iron floor. There was no tremor. There was no shockwave. A wave of pure, golden, celestial energy expanded from him, not as an attack, but as a harmonic resonance. It was the note of creation itself. The effect was absolute. The crimson energy barrier flickered, its frequency overwhelmed by a power it could not comprehend, and shattered into a million shards of silent, red light. The energy-dampening field dissolved, its synthetic hum replaced by the rush of clean, natural chakra flooding back into the room. The advanced, sleek white armor of the Genesis soldiers sparked, smoked, and then completely overloaded, every single one of them collapsing to the floor, unconscious. Their song of control had been utterly and completely silenced by a single, perfect note of harmony. The battle was over before most of the cages had even managed to throw a punch. Silence descended upon the hall, broken only by the sound of ragged breathing. The cages, the most powerful shinobi in the world, stared at the scene. They stared at the defeated, high-tech soldiers. They stared at Naruto's unconventional, terrifyingly effective team. But mostly, they stared at Naruto, who stood amongst the wreckage. His golden eyes holding not the arrogance of a victor, but the calm, unwavering certainty of a fundamental truth. They had come here as proud, powerful leaders, secure in their strength. They had just been rendered obsolete by an enemy they didn't understand, and then saved by a power they couldn't possibly comprehend. Their pride was shattered. Their world had been turned upside down. The wreckage, his body no longer crackling with lightning, looked at the fallen soldiers, then at Naruto. The arrogance was gone from his face, replaced by a grim, humbled understanding. He clenched his massive fist. Not in anger, but in resolve. He looked at Naruto, and for the first time, he saw not a rival or a rogue, but a leader. "Tell us your plan, Uzumaki," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble that was no longer a challenge, but a plea. Naruto looked at the faces around the table, at the humbled cages, at the proud General Mifune. He looked at the women who now stood with him, the wise mage, the chaotic shapeshifter, the redeemed musician, the vengeful survivor, and the powerful cage who now looked at him with something far more than political admiration. A disparate, volatile, and unbelievably powerful group, his group. The storm had arrived, and they were now its eye. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. Hearts of Fire. The iron-bound doors of the summit hall did not close. They remained open, a gaping wound that let the cold, unforgiving air of the land of iron sweep into the chamber, a silent testament to the shattering of the old world order. The cages, who had entered this room as the pillars of their nations, now looked like men and women adrift in a sudden, violent sea. Their power, the very foundation of their identities, had been rendered a parlor trick by an enemy they hadn't known existed. And their rescuer was the very rogue element they had intended to censure. The irony was as sharp and cold as the wind. There was no debate. There were no arguments over jurisdiction or historical grievances. Such things were the luxuries of a world that no longer existed. In the face of their shared, imminent extinction, the pride of the 5 great nations was a currency that had lost all value. The interrogation of the unconscious Genesis soldiers was a surreal affair. It took place right there, in the center of the summit hall. A's top intelligence operative, a man known for his brutal and effective mind-breaking techniques, failed utterly. The soldiers' minds were shielded by a technology that seemed to actively repel chakra-based intrusion. "It's no use," the operative grunted, sweating from the effort. "It's like trying to grab smoke. Their consciousness is walled off." Gwen stepped forward, her expression one of calm, academic focus. "Their technology creates a closed loop of bioelectric energy around the cerebral cortex. A chakra-based probe is like trying to use a key in a lock that has been filled with solder." "But Mana," she said, her hands beginning to glow with a soft pink light, "doesn't try to pick the lock. It persuades the door to open." She knelt beside one of the soldiers, placing her fingertips on his helmet. "Veritas Revelare, Animus Patefacer." She whispered the incantation, the ancient words of her magic, a strange and beautiful music in the stark, silent hall. A complex, shimmering pink mandala of light spread from her fingers, covering the soldier's head. It did not force its way in. It resonated with the shield, finding its frequency, harmonizing with it, and then gently, persuasively, asking it to lower. The soldier's body twitched once, and then his mind lay open to her like a book. To augment the process, Tayuya stepped up, placing 2 fingers on the soldier's neck, her eyes closed in concentration. His heart rate is a mess, she murmured. Lying. He's trying to feed her surface-level lies, even in a trance. She began to hum a low, single note, a specific frequency that vibrated through the soldier's body. This frequency will cause a microarrhythmia every time his brain attempts to formulate a falsehood. His own body will betray his deception. The combination was terrifyingly effective. The mage and the musician, working in perfect, unnatural synergy, dismantled the soldier's mental defenses with a surgeon's precision. Within minutes, they had a location. A primary research and development hub, designated Forge 01. It was located in the Land of Steam, a small, neutral nation known for its strange, geothermal geography and its now defunct, ancient industrial complexes. Genesis had reactivated one of these gargantuan, forgotten factories, the ironworks of the Forgotten Age, and turned it into a fortress. And its primary function, according to the soldier's fractured thoughts, was the imminent activation of a weapon codenamed the Chorus. The Chorus, Naruto repeated, the name sending a chill down his spine that had nothing to do with the cold. It's a large-scale Versi. On of the dampening field they used here. But it doesn't just suppress chakra. Its purpose is to emit a harmonic frequency that pacifies, that erases strong emotion, dissent, free will. It forces a state of absolute, placid obedience on any mind within its range. They intend to turn entire nations into mindless, obedient puppets, Gaara finished, his voice a low, horrified whisper. The former Jinchuriki, who had fought so hard to escape the prison of his own inner demon, was visibly shaken by the prospect of a world without choice. This is not a weapon of war, Onoki rasped, his aged face pale. It is a weapon of damnation. The plan was forged in the cold fire of this new reality. A full-scale invasion would be a massacre. The technology Genesis possessed would decimate a traditional shinobi army. It required a surgical strike. A spearhead, composed of Naruto and his team, would infiltrate the ironworks, their primary objective to find and destroy the Chorus before it could be activated. The elite forces of the 5 great nations, led by the cages themselves, would follow, their objective to secure the facility, capture Genesis personnel, and contain the fallout. For the first time in history, the armies of the leaf, sand, cloud, stone, and mist would fight under a single, unified command. And the man they all looked to for that command was Naruto Uzumaki. The night before the assault was a strange, suspended moment in time. Their staging ground was a small, hastily erected encampment in a snow-dusted pine forest on the border of the Land of Iron. The air was thick with the tension of impending battle, yet it was also filled with a new, fragile sense of unity. Cloud and Leaf shinobi, who would have been at each other's throats a week ago, shared rations and sharpened their kunai in grim, companionable silence. In the center of the camp, a bonfire roared, a lone point of defiant warmth and light against the oppressive, cold darkness of the forest. Naruto's team was gathered there, a bizarre and potent collection of individuals who had no business being on the same side, yet somehow formed a cohesive whole. Satsuki stood apart, her back to the fire, staring into the darkness of the trees. A solitary, brooding shadow. Her presence was a source of palpable tension. The cages had only agreed to her participation after Naruto had given his personal, absolute guarantee of her conduct. She was a weapon on a leash, and the leash was held by Naruto alone. Mei Terumi approached Naruto, her expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. She held 2 cups of warm sake. A drink, for the eve of battle. She offered, her voice a low, melodic murmur against the crackle of the flames. Naruto accepted the cup, the warmth of the ceramic a small, pleasant comfort against the cold. Thank you, Mizukage Dono. Mei, she corrected gently, her green eyes holding his. Tonight, we are not cages and lords. We are simply soldiers facing the dawn. And I find myself wondering, are you ever afraid? Naruto Uzumaki, he looked into the heart of the fire, the golden flames dancing in his own golden eyes. I used to be, he admitted, his voice quiet. I was afraid of being alone, of being hated, of being weak. He took a slow sip of the sake. Now, I am afraid of failing them. He glanced around the fire, at Gwen, who was in a quiet, intense discussion with Gar. About the theoretical applications of sand and mana, at Lucy and Tayuya, who were having a surprisingly amicable argument over which of them could take down the wreckage faster. His gaze lingered for a moment on the rigid, lonely back of Satsuki. "You carry a weight that would crush a mountain," Mei said softly, moving to stand beside him, their shoulders almost touching. The subtle scent of her perfume, a fragrance of exotic, night-blooming flowers, mingled with the smoke of the fire. "But you are not a mountain. You are not a king upon a lonely throne." She looked up at his face, her own illuminated by the fire's glow. "You are a sunrise, and you make others want to turn their faces to your light." Her words were a profound and intimate thing, a confession of faith that went far beyond political alliance. Before Naruto could respond, Satsuki's cold voice cut through the air. "The sentiment is touching," she said, turning from the darkness, her Sharingan eyes glowing faintly in the gloom. "But the sun can also burn. Do not forget that." Her words were for Mei, but her eyes were locked on Naruto. It was not a threat. It was a warning, and a strange, possessive claim. The air cracked, led with a tension that had nothing to do with the coming battle. Mei's polite smile tightened. Gwen paused in her conversation, her perceptive eyes flicking between the three of them. Lucy just raised an eyebrow, a low whistle on her lips. Naruto simply met Satsuki's gaze, his expression unreadable. "A fire only burns those who try to control it, Satsuki," he said softly. "Those who understand it, it gives warmth." He finished his sake and placed the cup down. "Get some rest, all of you. We move at first light." He walked away, leaving the three most powerful women in the encampment, the wise mage, the vengeful survivor, and the brilliant Cage, to stare into the flames, each of them contemplating the nature of the fire he commanded, and the warmth they had each felt in his presence. The onworks of the Forgotten Age was a metal behemoth, a rust-colored skeleton of a dead era half buried in a valley of sulphurous steam vents. It was a place of sharp angles, of screeching, metallic groans, and the constant, unnerving hiss of geothermal pressure. Genesis had retrofitted it with their sterile, white aesthetic, panels of their impossible, light-absorbing armor plating covering the rusting iron like a parasitic growth. The infiltration was silent and swift. There were no guards. Genesis relied on their technology. Naruto, however, simply reached out, his celestial senses tasting the flow of energy in the facility. He found a single, forgotten steam conduit, a flaw in their perfect, technological shell. Lucy flowed through it first in her liquid form, disabling the internal sensor. From the inside with a localized electromagnetic pulse she had learned from Gwen. They emerged into a place that was a desecration of life itself. The interior of the ironworks was a vast, cavernous space, filled with the sterile, white architecture of Genesis. But it was the sound that was the most horrifying. It was a low, constant, monotonous hum. And everywhere, there were people. Hundreds of them. They were the missing villagers from dozens of small, outlying communities, all dressed in simple, gray tunics. They moved with a placid, zombie-like grace, performing maintenance tasks, their faces utterly blank, their eyes empty. They were the first test subjects of the chorus, their wills already erased. "My God," Gwen whispered, her hand flying to her mouth. "They're empty. They are the future Genesis wants," Naruto said, his voice a low, cold fury. "A world without pain, without conflict, without choice." Their objective was a massive, spire-like structure in the center of the cavern, the chorus itself. It was already beginning to glow, a sign that it was powering up for a wide-range broadcast. "Split up," Naruto commanded, his voice cutting through the horrified silence. "Gwen, Tayuya, you're on the device. Find a way to shut it down or overload it. Your skills with energy and frequency are our only hope. Lucy, Satsuki, create a diversion. Draw the main security force away from the spire. And find the holding cells. There are other prisoners here, ones they haven't processed yet. Get them out." He looked at Mei, who had insisted on being part of the spearhead. "Mei Dono, you and I will deal with the conductor of this twisted orchestra." The teams broke off, melting into the shadows of the massive complex. Gwen and Tayuya reached the base of the spire. It was a technological nightmare. A web of glowing conduits and resonating crystals, all protected by an energy shield that shimmered with a deadly, crimson light. I can't brute force it, Gwen said, her diog. Gnostic spells already analyzing the shield. The energy is self-stabilizing. It's like trying to punch water. Frequency, Tayuya grunted, her ears twitching. Everything has a frequency, even this shield. It's not a single note. It's a chord, a really ugly, complicated chord. If we can find the right dissonant note, we can make it shatter itself. The two of them set to work, the mage and the musician. One analyzing the shield's magical and technological structure, the other listening for the flaw in its song. Meanwhile, on the other side of the facility, Lucy and Satsuki erupted from the shadows in a whirlwind of chaos. Lucy became a massive, multi-limbed creature of destruction, tearing through Genesis constructs with a joyful, savage glee. Satsuki was her polar opposite, a blade of cold, precise fury. Her black flames of Amaterasu consumed Genesis armor and technology with an unstoppable hunger. They were a bizarre but brutally effective pair, the unstoppable force and the immovable object of destruction. The white-armored Genesis soldiers converged on their position, drawn to the beautiful, deadly chaos they were creating. At the apex of the spire, in a sterile, white control room that overlooked the entire cavern, Naruto and Mei found their target. He was not a warrior. He was a man in a simple, gray robe, his face calm and beatific, his eyes holding a serene, detached pity. He stood before a massive, holographic display showing the pacified faces of the people below. This was the conductor. "You are too late," the conductor said, his voice the same synthetic, emotionless tone as the broadcast. "The chorus is already singing its song of peace. Soon, this entire continent will know the tranquility of a world without the burden of choice." "The peace of the grave is not peace," Mei snarled, her hands flashing through seals. Lava style. Lava globs jutsu. She spat a volley of molten rock, a technique that could melt steel. The conductor didn't even flinch. A panel in the floor slid open, and a single, sleek Genesis sentinel rose to intercept the attack, its armor absorbing the lava without a scratch. "Your passions are the disease," the conductor stated calmly. "We are the cure." The battle was joined. Mei's furious, passionate jutsus of fire, water, and lava were a beautiful, deadly dance against the cold, implacable defense of the Genesis sentinels. She was a dragon, breathing fire and steam, a force of raw, elemental nature. Naruto moved past her, his eyes locked on the conductor. He was wreathed in a gentle, golden aura of celestial fire. He was not a creature of rage, but a force of absolute, unwavering conviction. As a sentinel fired a beam of disruptive energy at him, he simply swatted it aside, his hand moving through the beam as if it were nothing more than a bothersome insect. He reached the conductor, who looked at him with his serene, pitying eyes. "You wield the ultimate power of creation, and you use it to defend this chaos. This pain. You could give them a world of perfect peace. Why do you cling to their flaws?" "Because a world without flaws is a world without beauty," Naruto replied, his voice a low, powerful harmony. Quote, "A world without pain is a world without joy. You are not a savior. You are a thief, and you will not steal anything else." He placed his hand on the conductor's forehead. He did not kill him. He did something far more profound. He let the conductor feel everything. The burning loyalty of his friends. The fierce, passionate heart of Mei as she fought to protect her people. The desperate, defiant hope of Tayuya's new music. The stubborn, unyielding flicker of defiance in Satsuki's soul. He showed him the beautiful, terrible, chaotic, and magnificent symphony of life. The conductor's serene expression broke. His eyes widened in a silent, soul-shattering scream as the sheer, overwhelming reality of what he was trying to erase flooded his consciousness. He collapsed, his mind not broken, but irrevocably, fundamentally changed. At that exact moment, in the base of the spire, Tayuya found the note. "There," she yelled, a harmonic imbalance in the primary crystal. A single, flawed frequency. Gwen didn't hesitate. "Give it to me." Tayuya played the single, dissonant note on her flute, and Gwen captured its essence, weaving it into a spell, a spear of pure, pink mana that was perfectly, precisely out of tune with the shield. She hurled it. The mana spear struck the shield. There was no explosion. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a single, high-pitched whine began to emanate from the spire. The ugly, Crimson cord of the shield's frequency wavered, faltered, and then, with a deafening crack, the entire shield, and the massive resonating crystal at the heart of the chorus, shattered into a billion pieces of inert, useless glass. As the spire died, a wave of pure, psychic shock washed over the cavern. The hundreds of pacified villagers below all stumbled, clutching their heads. A low, collective moan of pain and confusion rose from the crowd. And then, for the first time, a child began to cry. The sound of that single, genuine, painful emotion was the most beautiful sound any of them had ever heard. The chorus was broken. The battle was won. But as Naruto looked out from the control room, his gaze swept across the chaos below. He saw Lucy, in her monstrous form, shielding a group of freed prisoners. He saw Gwen and Tayuya, standing back to back amidst the wreckage of the spire, exhausted but victorious. And he saw Satsuki. She was standing over the unconscious form of a Genesis soldier. Her blade at his throat, but she had hesitated. She was looking at the crying child in the crowd, her Sharingan eyes wide with an emotion he could not decipher. A stray sentinel, its programming still active, rose from the wreckage and fired one last, desperate shot. It was not aimed at the cages, or at the spire. It was aimed at the crying child's family. Satsuki saw it, Naruto saw it, and in that split second, they both moved. Satsuki was a blur of black, intending to intercept the blast with her own body. But Naruto was faster. He was a whisper of gold, appearing between Satsuki and the energy beam in an instant that defied time itself. He didn't raise a shield. He didn't negate it. He simply took the hit. The blast engulfed him, a silent, terrible explosion of crimson light. Mei screamed his name. Satsuki's eyes widened in sheer, horrified disbelief. But as the light faded, Naruto still stood there. His robes were singed, and a thin trickle of blood ran from the corner of his mouth. But he was unharmed. The celestial fire within him had consumed the blast from the inside out. He had taken the full force of a weapon that could atomize a cage, and he had simply endured it. He turned his head, his golden eyes meeting Satsuki's. She was staring at him, at the blood on his lips, her cold, porcelain mask of vengeance completely shattered, replaced by a raw, terrifying vulnerability. He had not just shielded the innocent family. He had shielded her. He gave her a small, tired smile. And in that moment, surrounded by the wreckage of their enemy and the sound of a world regaining its freedom, the hearts of fire that had been drawn to him all burned a little brighter, a little warmer, and a little more fiercely than ever before. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. Dawn of a New Era. The silence that fell in the wake of the final energy blast was more profound than the noise of the battle that had preceded it. It was a vacuum, filled only by the sound of a single, crying child, a sound of raw, unfiltered life in a hall of death and miraculous survival. Every eye, the humbled cages, the stoic samurai, the rescued prisoners, was fixed on the spot where Naruto stood, his indigo robes scorched. A line of crimson tracing a path from his lips, a stark, mortal wound on an immortal being. Satsuki stared, her Sharingan spinning uselessly, unable to process the data her own eyes were feeding her. Her entire life, her entire philosophy, had been built on a foundation of transactional power and inevitable betrayal. People did not sacrifice for others, they used them. Power was a tool for self-preservation, for vengeance. Yet, he had moved. He had moved to shield not just the innocents, but her. Her, his rival, the ghost of his past, the embodiment of a path he had rejected. He had placed his body, his very existence, between her and oblivion without a flicker of hesitation. The foundation of her world did not just crack, it turned to dust and blew away in the cold, geothermal wind. Mei's hand was at her mouth, her sharp, political mind silenced by the raw, primal terror she had felt in that moment, a terror that was now transmuting into a wave of fierce, overwhelming admiration that was anything but political. Gwen, Lucy, and Tayuya rushed forward, their faces masks of frantic concern, but they stopped short, sensing that this was a moment that belonged to the two figures at its center. Naruto wiped the blood from his lip with the back of his thumb, his gaze never leaving Satsuki's. The wound was already closing, the celestial fire within I am knitting his flesh back together with an effortless, internal grace. The battle is over, Satsuki, he said, his voice quiet, yet it carried across the cavernous space. She said nothing. She simply deactivated her Sharingan. Her eyes returning to their normal, onyx black, now shimmering with a terrifying, unfamiliar moisture. She took a single, hesitant step back, then turned and vanished into the shadows, a ghost fleeing the dawn. She did not run out of hatred or anger, but out of a profound, soul-shattering confusion she had no words for. Naruto watched her go, a flicker of understanding in his golden eyes. A wound that deep could not be healed in a single moment. But for the first time, he knew, with an absolute certainty, that it could be healed. The world did not change overnight, but it changed. The events at the ironworks, the Genesis incident, as it came to be known, was a cataclysm that shattered the old paradigms. The captured Genesis technology, a fusion of science and energy manipulation so advanced it bordered on magic, was a terrifying and tantalizing prize that could have plunged the nations into a new, even deadlier arms race. But it did not, because the world now had a new fulcrum. In the months that followed, the Genesis Accords were signed. It was an unprecedented treaty that established the Allied World Council, a governing body where the leaders of all nations, shinobi and samurai alike, would meet to address global threats. And the neutral, guiding hand of this council, the seat of its power and the keeper of its most dangerous secrets, was Edelgird. Naruto's hidden sanctuary was no longer hidden. It had become the beating heart of a new, fragile world peace, its existence a symbol of a future built not on borders but on shared purpose. A year passed, a year of rebuilding, of tense negotiations, of forging a new world from the ashes of the old. It was a year of profound, fundamental change, not just for the world, but for the man and the women at its center. On a high balcony overlooking the impossible, beautiful city of Edelgird, two figures stood watching the celestial ceiling swirl with its nebulae of purple and gold. One was Naruto Uzumaki, his presence a calm, steady sun. The other was Mei Terumi, the fifth Mizukage, though here, she was simply Mei. The new trade agreement between the Land of Water and the Land of Wind is proving fruitful, she said. Her voice a relaxed, contented murmur. Gaara is a surprisingly shrewd negotiator for someone who spends half his time contemplating the existential nature of sand. He has a good heart, Naruto replied, smiling, and a good advisor. He glanced at Mei, whose own political acumen had been instrumental in bridging the ancient gap between their two nations. Mei returned his smile, a genuine, warm expression that was rarely seen in the formal setting of a cage summit. It is easier to build bridges when one has a solid foundation to build upon. Her gaze swept over the peaceful, thriving city below. You have created a miracle here, Naruto. A place where the children of Mist and Leaf can play together without knowing the hatred of their grandparents. She grew quiet for a moment. I confess, I am envious. You are welcome here anytime, Mei, he said softly. You know that. I do, she said, her green eyes meeting his. But my place is with my people, helping them find their way to this new peace. She took a small, deliberate step closer, the scent of her perfume a subtle, alluring promise. It simply means I will have to make my visits count. Invitation in her voice was as clear and deep as a summer ocean, a mature, confident affection built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared power. In the Core Spire's primary research laboratory, a place that hummed with a power that was neither purely magic nor purely technology, Gwen Tennyson and Naruto stood before a colossal, shimmering array. It was a golden, fuinjutsu-based matrix, 30 feet in diameter. Interwoven with pulsating, pink conduits of pure mana. It was the culmination of a year of their combined genius, the Chronos Ward, a planetary scale seal designed to detect and stabilize dimensional instabilities. The primary resonance is stable at 98.7%, Gwen announced, her eyes scanning a dozen holographic displays at once, her mind processing the data with AS. That was a miracle in its own right. The mana to chakra energy conversion is holding steady. We've done it, Naruto. We've created a planetary immune system against dimensional incursions. Naruto placed his hand on the central golden matrix. He could feel the pulse of the ward, a new, steady heartbeat for his world. He could feel Gwen's own energy woven into it, her brilliant, ordered mind a tangible presence in the seal's structure. We did it, Gwen, he corrected, turning to her, his golden eyes filled with a profound, appreciative warmth. Your knowledge, your perspective, it has expa. NDED my own understanding of the universe in ways I never thought possible. Gwen felt a familiar blush rise to her cheeks, but she met his gaze, her own green eyes shining with a shared passion. We're good together, she said. The simple words carrying the weight of 1,000 complex equations. Theirs was a bond forged in the crucible of intellect and discovery, a meeting of minds so perfect it was its own form of love. The training grounds of Edelgird echoed with the chaotic, joyful sounds of combat. Lucy, in the form of a sleek, four-armed creature of living chrome, was sparring with a dozen of Edelgard's newest sentinels. She moved between them like a whirlwind, her attacks a fluid, unpredictable dance, disarming and disabling them with a playful, efficient grace. She was not just a warrior, she was a teacher. Her very existence a lesson in thinking outside the rigid confines of traditional combat. From the sidelines, Tayuya watched, her arms crossed. Beside her, a new instrument rested, a koto. Its wood pale and shimmering, its strings made of a crystalline material that resonated with chakra. As she watched Lucy fight, her fingers idly plucked at the strings, creating a complex, high-energy melody that seemed to perfectly match the chaotic rhythm of the spar. She was no longer just playing her own song, she was learning to harmonize with others. When the session ended, Naruto was there, a proud, quiet smile on his face. Your students are improving, Lucy, he commented. Lucy morphed back into her human form, grinning. They're getting there, still trying to ACH them that sometimes the best plan is to turn into a puddle and trip the other guy. She looked at him, her amethyst eyes sparkling. This is good, you know. Building something, protecting it, it feels real. It is, Naruto said. He then turned to Tayuya. And your music grows more beautiful every day. Tayuya just grunted, her default response, but he could see the faint, pleased blush on her cheeks. Her loyalty to him was an absolute, a fierce, protective thing born from the ashes of her own personal hell. He had not just saved her, he had given her a reason to create rather than destroy. His connection to Satsuki was a quieter, more distant thing, a bond maintained across continents by whispers of fire and shadow. She had not returned to Edelgird. Her path was a solitary one, a penance of her own design. She had become the world's shadow operative, the blade in the dark that dismantled the last, festering remnants of Genesis and other organizations that preyed on the weak. A small, golden phoenix, made of pure, sentient flame, materialized in Naruto's private study. It spoke with Satsuki's voice, a message from the far-off land of Earth. The last cell has been neutralized. The tech has been secured. The world is quiet. There was a pause. I found another of their labs. They were experimenting on children again. I stopped them. The children are safe now. There was a new emotion in her voice. Something beyond the cold satisfaction of vengeance. It was the quiet, unfamiliar warmth of having protected someone. Naruto sent his own fiery messenger in reply. Good. Come home, Satsuki. The war is over. The response was a long time coming. I don't know how. The words were a quiet, heartbreaking confession. Then let me show you, he sent back, his message a simple, unwavering promise across the miles. His visit to Konaha was a strange, full-circle moment. He walked the streets not as a pariah or a weapon, but as a world leader, greeted with a respect that was still tinged with a deep, profound awe. But he was not there for the Hokage or the council. He found Hinata in the quiet, serene gardens of the Hyuga compound. She was practicing her katas, her movements no longer hesitant or timid, but fluid, confident, and breathtakingly graceful. The strength he had always known she possessed had finally blossomed for all the world to see. She stopped when she sensed his presence, turning to him. Her pale lavender eyes holding the same gentle, unwavering admiration they always had, but it was now joined by a quiet, self-assured strength. Naruto-sama, she said, her bow respectful, but her gaze direct. Just Naruto, Hinata, he said, his smile gentle. Always. They walked together through the gardens, a comfortable, peaceful silence between them. They did not need to speak of the battles, of the politics, of the complexities of his new life. She had watched him from afar, and in her own empathetic way, she understood it all. She was his connection to the world he had come from. The quiet, steadfast heart of the village he had fought so hard to protect, even when it had not deserved it. There is a festival in Edelgird, he said, as they stopped beside a koi pond. The Festival of Starlight. It celebrates the founding of the city, the birth of our new era of peace. I would be honored if you would attend. A soft, beautiful blush graced her cheeks, but her smile was not shy. It was radiant. I would like that very much, Naruto-kun. The Festival of Starlight was a spectacle of impossible beauty. Edelgird was alive with light and music. Floating lanterns, each one a unique, glowing fuinjutsu array, drifted through the city like a river of earthbound stars. The air was filled with the sound of Tayuya's koto, her melody now leading an entire orchestra, a grand, sweeping symphony of hope and resilience that brought tears to the eyes of all who heard it. Naruto was not on a throne, watching from above. He was in the heart of it all, a part of the celebration. And with him was his family. He danced with Mei, their movements a graceful, practiced rhythm of two powerful leaders who were also simply a man and a woman enjoying a moment of peace. He stood with Gwen, their conversation a quiet, brilliant counterpoint to the music as they debated the celestial mechanics of a distant nebula. He laughed as Lucy, in the form of a great, purple dragon, performed a playful aerial ballet with the children. He shared a quiet nod with Tayuya, a profound, unspoken acknowledgement of how far she had come. He saw Hinata, her usual reserved demeanor melted away, a look of pure, unadulterated wonder on her face as she took in the magic of his city. And across the crowded plaza, he saw a flash of midnight hair and a crimson eye. Satsuki was there, standing in the shadows at the edge of the celebration, a hesitant, tentative ghost finally daring to step into the light. She was not ready to join the party, but she was willing to watch. And for now, that was enough. Later, as the festival reached its crescendo, they all found themselves on his balcony, the place where so many of his solitary contemplations had occurred. But tonight, it was not solitary. He was surrounded by them, by these brilliant, powerful, and beautiful women who had become the pillars of his new world. They stood together in a comfortable, easy silence, watching the river of lanterns flow through their city. It was a moment of perfect, hard-won peace. Gwen's wrist-mounted diagnostic tool, a device she was never without, suddenly chirped, a soft, inquisitive note that cut through the peaceful atmosphere. Odd, she murmured, tapping at its holographic interface. I'm picking up a signal. It's faint, but it's definitely not local. Genesis? Satsuki asked, her voice sharp, her instincts instantly on high alert. No, Gwen said, her brow furrowed in concentration, her eyes wide with a dawning sense of wonder. The energy signature it's like yours, Naruto. But different, older. It's not from this world. It's not even from this dimension. She looked up from the device, her gaze turning to the star-dusted sky above. It's celestial, and it's coming from outside our galaxy. It's a message. Naruto looked up at the infinite, silent tapestry of the cosmos, the same sky he had watched on so many lonely nights. But he was not lonely anymore. He was surrounded by his family, by the disparate, wonderful, and fiercely loyal hearts who had been drawn to his fire. A new threat, a new mystery, a new adventure calling from the vast, unknown darkness between the stars. He did not feel the weight of a burden. He felt the thrill of a promise. He looked at the women around him, at the dawn of his new era, and a slow, confident smile spread across his face. His golden eyes shining with the light of 1,000 suns, ready for whatever came next. The story of the lonely boy was over. The legend of the celestial phoenix and his family was just beginning. Chapter 10 End. The end. Remember to subscribe and like this video. See you in the next video.